What's up, everyone? This is your host, Ghost, coming to you live with another wonderful video. How's everyone doing today? Sorry. Sorry about that. One second. There we go. All right. Sorry. Same issue as yesterday. Why I'm late. Just had some trouble getting everyone down and situated. God, I'm fucking tired. All right. So, let's see. Oh, wait, hold on. So how's everyone doing today? Got some interesting stuff going on today. World War III is really starting. So make sure you pack up on that TP. Israel sent a retaliatory strike on Iran yesterday. So I mean, I didn't think they'd actually do it, but yeah. So Iran, as everyone knows, I covered this Monday-ish or sometime. Iran sent a couple missiles towards Israel. Israel's Iron Dome defended it, used its Iron Dome to pretty much mitigate most of the damage. There was still a few that got through, but according to them, they were left relatively unscathed. So I mean, everything's good on that front. But yesterday, Israel sent a few strikes in Iran earlier on Friday. Yesterday. This is Friday. I'm assuming that means Friday their time, not our time. So we're gonna get into that and take a look. See, before that, we're gonna check out the Trump trial. I'm gonna look at an update. I guess I believe all the 12 jurors have been selected, and the alternates have been picked as well. So my prediction was off by a day. Because I predicted they'd finish up jury selection today. But I was wrong. Oh, no, never mind. Never mind. Never mind. Let's see. There's still, I think they've picked the full 12 people that are going to be on. And then, and then they're doing the alternates today. So, hey, depending on how long this takes, maybe I will be right. Who knows? That would be a good stroke to my ego. Anyways, moving on. So we got Trump trial. Then we'll talk about Israel, and finally, last but not least, Andrew Wilson, host of the Crucible, with a feminist he had a conversation with on one of the panels a while back on whatever. He had a debate with her on whatever yesterday. We're gonna listen in and I'm gonna react to it. Andrew Wilson's an amazing debater. I've become a huge fan of him overnight. Hopefully you are as well. Or you will be too. So we're gonna check out this debate. He did another one, which was just as was far more frustrating to listen to because the woman was just annoying as hell, in my opinion. I don't think I'll react to that one today. Maybe I'll react to it Monday, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't decided. I'm gonna react to this one. This is gonna take up pretty much the entire rest of the show. We'll listen at 1.5 speed like I normally do because it's a 2.5 hour long debate. So, sorry. So yeah. So before we get into anything, housekeeping. Make sure you follow me on X at official WGhost. That's the best way to find out when I'm going to go live and to get the links of where I'm going. You can also watch me on X as well, which would be smart for me to set up in case I do get people chatting. And then of course rumble.com/ sorry, seeing something interesting. Rumble.com/ with ghosts as the best way to find out. Okay, sorry, I got something that caught my eyes all. So rumble.com/ with ghost, that is the best way to find out, or sorry, that is where I will be no matter what. Unless something terrible happens, I will be on Rumble for forever. Find Rumble the best place to, I don't know, for anything. Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm pulling up the pop out chat just in case someone messages me on here. I don't want to accidentally ignore anyone, so that's why I'm somewhat distracted. All right, there we go. All right. So yeah, rumble.com/ with ghosts, best way to, watch me, because no matter what, even if I don't stream anywhere, it's gonna be Rumble. YouTube.com/ at with ghost. It's my YouTube channel. Twitch.tv/ at official with ghost. And then so follow me there. And then of course my gaming channel, rumble.com/ gaming with ghost. I have not been streaming. I've been fairly busy. If anyone doesn't know, they're watching for the first time, I have a newborn. So constantly helping my wife and taking care of the newborn. So I am hoping starting this week, starting Sunday, I'll be streaming more on my gaming channel. Playing Helldivers 2 lately, so I feel the need to fight for democracy. I think that's everything. If you want to speak or donate, of course, you need to go to rumble.com. So, all right, let's get into it. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing me promote myself. I'm tired of hearing myself promote myself. That makes sense. All right, there we go. Okay. So yeah, the full 12-person panel or jury has been seated in Donald Trump's criminal trial. It's comprised of 7 men, 5 women. An alternate woman has also been chosen. So we got 1 out of the 6 alternates we need. So there's 5 more alternates to go. Let's see. So, let's see. Judge Merchant last week released a questionnaire that is being presented to potential jurors. It contains multiple questions that could signal political views to the lawyers on both sides. Panel of 12 New Yorkers and 6 alternates need to be seated to decide whether to convict Donald Trump. 6 jurors are impaneled so far. So here's some of the questions. News consumption, affiliation with groups like Proud Boys, QAnon, and Antifa. So I guess Antifa would be against Trump. Whether prospect jurors or anyone in their circle attended a Trump rally or anti-Trump event. If you ever read a book or listened to podcasts from Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer and key witness for district attorney, or if they've read any of Trump's own books. Those in the jury pools will also be asked if they have views on whether a former president can be charged in state court and how Trump is being treated in this case. Questions are being used for the judge to strike jurors at the outset. If they don't believe they can render a verdict fairly, they are also being used by lawyers for both sides to strike jurors for any reason, a key part of the jury selection process. 39 prospective jurors remain. So, yeah, this is probably going to take up the rest of the day. 9 more potential jurors excused for scheduling conflict. Prospective jurors are asked if they have a scheduling conflict. 40 have been excused. Oh, yeah, 39 remain. Okay, so 48 have been excused. They feel impartial. Looks surprised to see Trump at the defense table. And introduce Trump as a defendant to a new batch of prospective jurors. New potential prosecutors remain. So that's for voir dire. These people are claiming. I think the gag, Trump's under a gag order. I think gag orders are bullshit. Let the guy say whatever he wants. You don't like it, fucking tough. Deal with it. Unless he's violating the law that's already in place, go fuck yourself. All right, so a gag order was issued by Judge Merchant to stop Trump from making statements about witnesses, jurors, prosecutors, court staff, or family members of prosecution and court staff in late March. If Donald Trump had simply typed out what he typed out, but not put quotation marks around it and attributed it to Jesse Waiters, it would be a straight down the middle flagrant violation of the gag order. I don't think Donald Trump's going to be able to convince the judge that he can get around it simply by attributing it to someone else or taking something that someone else said and reposting it. Why not? Hongen added that the fundamental reason for the gag order was to protect members of the jury. Has Donald Trump talked about members of the jury, or has he talked about people that have been released because they're they can't be partial or anything? I have no idea. I don't have True Social. Prosecutors are now saying that Trump has violated gag order 7 times. According to when they say Trump violated gag order, one link to a New York Post article calling Michael Cohen a serial perjurer. So just reposting is violating the gag order. That seems kind of bullshit. In the case, an embarrassment for the New York legal system. Later that day, Trump posted the same link and the same text on his website. They say late night on 7:09 p.m. They say Trump posted another article showing Cohen and attacking his credibility. Finally, and this is the most disturbing post in light of what just happened this morning, Connery said that they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to judge in order to get on the Trump jury, quoting the commentator Jesse Waiters. Trump's attorney Emile Bove argues that there's a gray area with Cohen, who repeatedly talked about Trump in the public. He says Trump's response about Cohen have been political in nature. So a juror seated to 6 after juror. Oh, down to 6. So yeah, this was a juror who had part of her identity made public. So juror number 2 told Judge Merchant aspects of my identity had already been out there in the public yesterday alone. I had friends, colleagues, and family push things to my phone, questioning my identity as a juror. Jurors' concern reflect the historic nature of the case and the intense pressure in a polarized political climate. I will be on the panel of people who are called to do their civic duty to be fair and impartial. Merchant then addressed the press in the court, telling them there's a reason this is an anonymous jury. Merchant says he agrees with the defense that it's important to obtain information about prospective juror employers, but he says he is going to have those questions answered to question 3A and 3D redacted from the court record, directing the press in the court and in the overflow not to report those answers. It's become a problem, Merchant says. Who is your current employer? Who is your previous employer? Patrick Times, I 100% agree with you. It's definitely political. Of course, it's political. Let's see. All Trump's trials have been political. Trump's attorney suggested judge tell media to not publish where jurors work. Okay, so they push back about not naming, not description, juror excused. All right, so that seems to be all the updates from yesterday. So again, back up here. It looks like they're doing alternates, and they're going to do a Saldova hearing. So just hearing about any bad acts, previous bad acts. So I guess I was right. It looks like my prediction is going to come true. We will be hearing from. We will be probably more than likely starting the trial Monday. So I think for the most part, I'll end up just strictly reading what's happening in the Trump trial. So I think for the most part, a lot of my coverage is going to be strictly on the Trump trial for the next couple weeks. So prepare for that. Again, Thursday, I think it is. We'll be watching. Friday. Next Friday, we'll be checking out the arguments for Trump's immunity. We'll go from there. All right. Sorry. We're looking at that intensely. Moving on. So make sure y'all have your toilet paper. Israel strikes site in Iran in retaliation for weekend assault. Iran attacked Israel over the weekend in retaliation for Israel's deadly strikes on Iran's consulate earlier this month. Israel carried out limited strikes in Iran early Friday in retaliation for Tehran firing a barrage of missiles and drones at Israel last Sunday. A well-placed military source has told Fox News that the strike was limited. Yeah, I don't think Iran's going to give a shit. Sources familiar said the U.S. was not involved, and there were pre-notifications to the U.S. from Israelis. Fox News confirmed that there have been explosions in Iran's Isfahan province, which is where Natanz, one of Iran's nuclear facilities, is located. Though it is initially unclear if the facility was hit, state TV describes all sites in the area are fully safe, and the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed on X Friday morning that there were no damage. Details surrounding the intended strike, the target of the strike, if there was one, were not immediately available, but Fox News was able to confirm the target was not nuclear or civilian. It's probably some sort of military. As of early Friday morning, Pentagon officials have not confirmed the strike, and the White House and National Security Council have declined to comment on the unfolding situation. The semi-official Fars news agency reported on the sound of explosions over Isfahan near its international airport. It offers no explanation for the blast. However, Isfahan is home to a major airbase of the Iranian military, and as well as sites associated with its nuclear program. A senior Iranian official allegedly told Reuters that Iran has no plans to immediately respond to Israeli strike, which was described differently on Iranian state media. The explosion heard in Isfahan were allegedly a result of the country's air defense system activating, not a missile attack, the officials told Reuters. Former Israeli Defense Force spokesperson Jonathan Korakis wrote on X, while Iran appears to downplay the strike, he thinks they've gotten the message. Okay. Iran temporarily grounded commercial flights into Tehran and across areas of its western and central regions in response to the attack. Restrictions have since been lifted on flights to and from Khomeini and Mehrabad international airports in Tehran, according to Iranian news agency Tasnim. Dubai-based carriers Emirates and Flying Dubai began diverting from around Western Iran at 4:30 a.m. local time. In a statement to Fox News Digital, Fly Dubai said flight FZ 1929 from Dubai to Tehran on Friday morning returned to Dubai, became the Imam Khomeini International Airport was closed because the Khomeini International Airport was closed. Airlines also said all of its flights to Iran on Friday have been canceled. Sorry. Mm-hmm. The safety of our passengers and crew is our priority. We are monitoring the situation closely and will make changes to our flight path in consultation with the relevant authorities. A Fly Dubai spokesperson said, "We will share any further updates once more information becomes available." In response to Israeli reported strike on Iran, the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem issued a security notice Friday morning out of an abundance of caution, restricting U.S. government employees and their family members from personal travel outside the Great Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Be'er Sheva areas until further notice. Iran attacked Israel over the weekend in retaliation for a deadly strike on Iran's consulate in Syria earlier this month. Okay. All right. So there we go. So are you shitting your pants? If you're shitting your pants, make sure you go get the toilet paper. Because we all know the best way to protect yourself is to get a shit ton of toilet paper. World War III is happening. We need the toilet paper. I know I'm dumb. All right. So this is I didn't really think they'd strike back. So this is interesting. I guess all we can do is wait and see. Iran has threatened after their initial strike that they would that they caution Israel from doing a strike themselves, and basically saying like if you hit us, it's going to be worse for you. So we'll see if they end up keeping their word. I suspect they will, but I don't know what they'll do to kind of get back. Maybe over the weekend we will see something going on. But so I guess if you're in Israel, get the fuck out of there right now because shit's about to go down. It might be intelligent to get the fuck out while you still can. I don't know. It's interesting. It looks like war is escalating in the Middle East. We'll see how all this ends up happening. I just hope the U.S. stays out of it as much as possible. I don't even want us giving aid to Israel. Definitely not going to war for them. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Israel has not been doing some very intelligent shit. They always keep bombing people instead of using some precision airstrikes or precision strikes. But yeah, so I'm honestly kind of surprised Israel. Well, I'm both not surprised and surprised Israel decided to attack Iran. Not surprised they did it. Kind of surprised because who knows what's gonna happen next. I would think if they were gonna strike back at Iran, they'd do it without having their fingerprints on it. So we'll see. I'm gonna assume that it was very clear that the strikes were sorry, hold on, brain fart. I'm going to assume that the strikes were aimed at the military base. So I don't think that's at all. Honestly, I'd be surprised if it wasn't the military base they were targeting. So it was clearly the military base. So we'll stay up to date on this story and we'll keep an eye out. I don't know what's going to happen. These are two nuclear powers for the most part. Iran says it doesn't have any nuclear weapons, but I bet they do. And if we're very unfortunate, we might find that out as fact later on. So make sure you stock up on necessary supplies, just to be on the safe side. And like I said, if you're in Israel or in Iran, get the fuck out because shit's about to go down. Get the fuck out. All right. So, never thought I'd see like a true war between Israel and the Middle East in my lifetime. Didn't think that was going to happen. Because for the most part nowadays, it's been, just airstrikes, maybe some small wars that not really between anyone, but is between people type deals, Cold wars, hidden wars. So this will be interesting to see what happens. I think I'm relatively safe where I am, but fuck, it's be a little nerve-wracking. I'll be happy as long as there's no draft. I don't want to go fight for Israel. All right. So we talked about Trump. We've talked about Israel. Now let's get away from the politics and let's watch the intersectional dynamics between men and women. Andrew Wilson, the king of blood sport debates, owner of the Crucible on whatever, and he is against the feminists. Now, I will say, to props to this woman, this woman was a lot better than the second one that he ended up debating. She seemed to have far more good faith, a good faith conversation with him. While towards about the middle of it, the second woman was more bratty. I would like to react to that one. I just don't know if I'll be able to, but we'll see. If it ends up taking the majority of my time with the Trump trial, I may end up going to 2 streams, but we'll see. So let's check this out. But yeah, she was, this was a relatively good conversation between the two of them. I don't think Andrew ever, changed his mind or anything. I think he did end up making her think a lot more than she thought of on her strong positions. She did have some ridiculous positions, especially when it came to abortion. So we'll listen to that. I will give my comments here and there. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy it. And make sure you check out the Crucible. That I've linked the channel below. I've linked this video particular below. If you're interested in whatever, I've linked their channel as well. Personally, I think FNF is superior than whatever. That's just my personal opinion. I respect Brian, what he does, because he's done pretty well. He's getting he's got 4.36 million subscribers, so can't hate there. But I think FNF is superior. And if that precludes me from ever showing up and being invited onto whatever, if I ever become famous, that's the price. But I'm going to be honest in what I think. I honestly, in my opinion, Brian, whatever could be good, but it needs to work on 2 things. And again, Brian probably doesn't give 2 shits about my opinion. He probably says, "Fuck this guy. He's a loser, anyways," and he's right in a sense. But honestly, if Brian fixed these 2 particular areas, it'd probably be a decent show. The first, it's the biggest one. It's his talk to text donations. They're it's you'll probably hear it throughout this podcast, but they go, it always ends up there that people are in the middle of the conversation Andrew's in the middle of his point, and I think Andrew's even expressed his opinion, his view that it's really frustrating. But but it always happens. Someone's in the middle. Good point. They're really going deep into the point, and then the stupid talk to text comes and not only derails but ends up taking away from the point, and it's dumb. So now it's part of his show, so I doubt he'll ever fix that. But that's one of the big ones. And then number 2 is Brian himself. He doesn't have really big of a backbone, it appears. He tries to like cover it by saying like, "Oh, I just feel like I just want to farm the clicks and the views and everything, and let me milk as much content from them as possible, and then I'll kick them out later." But there are points where like they come and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave," and like just let them leave. But he always tries and kind of begs them to come back on, and it's really annoying and dumb. And these broads want to leave, say, "All right, fuck off, go leave. I'm taking your link out of the description." So, but he always tries to beg him to come back on, and then they just end up being in a foul move and ruining the quality of the show. So Brian needs a little bit of a spine. He also lets these chicks disrespect him. He's like, "Can we move?" Like this last show he did with Andrew, he kind of ended up getting a little bit of a backbone, but not really. He lets the disrespect go on too long and too far. He doesn't check these women. I don't mean like he needs to like beat the shit out of him. He just needs like, "Hey, look, this is my show. I'll run it how I want. If I want to conversate with one particular person for a set amount of time, deal with it." Like, and I think if he did those 2 things, like, either increase the talk to text amount. So like instead of like $100 to do it, you'd get like, you need to do 500 or some shit like that. Or even like 250 or I don't know, 300 or whatever. Yeah, 300 maybe. Then I think it would help and not derail the conversation so much. And then if you just grow a goddamn spine, not like these chicks, these chicks always pretty much walk over him. I think if he did those few things, it probably would improve the quality of whatever. I still think Fresh and Fit would be superior, but I would have to admit that if those 2 things ended up changing, whatever would be a very far superior than it is now. So that's just my opinion. Brian probably, would just take it and wipe his ass with it. He doesn't care, and he shouldn't care. Just my opinion. The dude's running a very successful show. So what do I know? He's not watching this, but if he did, he'd probably just wipe his ass for it and be like, "What, fuck you, dude. I don't care for what you say." I'm like, "Hey, props to you." But if you want to watch the whatever podcast, just check out the links below. I've linked their channel. I've linked this particular episode. I am watching on whatever episode. Andrew Wilson's thing is he normally does a stream for himself on whatever show he is. So he kind of like multi-streams, even if he's not there. I didn't want to do that because then you get like you'll get like double the super chats and shit coming in. So just focusing on one channel. So we're watching this on whatever. All right. Without further ado, let's hold on. We're gonna bump this up to 1.5. I'll lower it if I think I need to. I don't think I'll need to. And let's get started.
Welcome to a special debate edition of the Whatever Podcast, coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer-supported, heavy YouTube demonetization, so please consider donating through Streamlabs instead of super chatting, as YouTube takes a brutal 30% cut. Some quick mastery also: if you super chat 100, YouTube takes 30. If you donate 100, Streamlabs only takes 3. Streamlabs.com/whatever. Link is in the description. You can see all the details for all the triggers that we do have in the description. We're just going to jump right into it. This is going to be a fairly laissez-faire debate, so without further ado, if you guys want to just introduce yourselves quickly.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson, host of The Crucible, fastest growing debate channel on YouTube, to my knowledge. Political satirist, political commentator, and I do blood sport debates. So I'd like to thank my opponent for coming out today. Really appreciate that very much, and looking forward to a good faith debate.
All right, welcome.
I'm Carly. I'm a UCSB student. I'm just a random person.
Well, no, hold on. So you're what are you studying at UCSB?
Political science.
Are you a grad student or undergrad?
I'm undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and we had you on one of our dating talks about it was what, 2 weeks ago or so?
Yeah.
And Andrew did a call in on that show, and you guys had quite I thought quite a good back and forth on various topics: feminism, sexism, racism, I think some other stuff.
Now, while I'll admit that this woman's views are dumb, a lot of her views are dumb. I got to give her props. She at least was respectful. She wasn't like, she didn't do any ad homs, personal attacks or anything like that. She just like, all right, well, these are my views. And they had a good discussion. Again, I think this particular debate was a lot better than the second one they had, where the chick ended up like, middle of it, kind of starting to become a little bratty. So, props to this woman. Doesn't matter if I think their opinions are wrong, if they can at least, articulate them or have a conversation, have a dialogue. I think that's always a good thing.
Did we talk?
And if we could do that a lot more often, instead of jumping down and doing personal attacks all the fucking time, or getting all aggro just because our views aren't the same as your views, probably end up being our country would probably be better off than it is.
About the geopolitics of Georgia, Georgia.
We haven't gotten into that.
Not into that.
Okay,
maybe a little later on the show. Perhaps a good place to start is, what did you guys disagree on during the podcast?
Well, I think primarily our focus was on feminist ideals and the optimal ways to raise families. So I'm happy to kind of dive in on that if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah.
So that we're not speaking past each other. When you define feminism, would you define it as the pursuance of egalitarianism between men and women?
Yes.
No other real qualifiers?
Not for me. I do think it's difficult to define, because I think that everyone kind of has their own definition. So when talking about it, it's difficult to discuss feminism. It's like a monolithic thing. But yeah, I think that's a good working definition.
If it's a movement towards egalitarianism, this would imply that there was not egalitarianism. And so feminism was set in opposition to patriarchy.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, so that's an entailment we can agree to.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start with a basic argument before I move to larger arguments. My first argument, my first objection, is what I call an equal force objection. Men are the enforcement arm of society. And because they are the enforcers of rights, and I don't believe that rights exist as an objective standard, but rather they're a social construction of the mind, what I think we actually have is what's called force, right? So force are rights. That's all rights really can be, because the entailment of a right is it's only as good as who can enforce it. I do not believe that women can enforce their own rights and that only men can enforce their rights. And so therefore, I do not believe egalitarianism is possible, nor should it be something that we move towards.
Mm-hmm. So you think that men are the enforcement arm in the sense that they enforce rights, or our conception of rights, or are you arguing that they're the enforcement arm as in they're enforcing law and order?
Well, let's back up to make sure that we're not speaking past each other again.
Okay.
So rights, you would agree, are not a tangible thing, but they're just a conception. They're a social construction.
Yes.
So if you are to have a right, an entitlement, absent a duty, if we can define a right as that, then what you're really talking about is force. You're talking about having force to make sure that you have this entitlement. That would be necessary. And so when I'm talking about force, I'm saying that men have the monopoly on force. And because they have a monopoly on force, anytime they so choose, they can take the rights away from women, but it's never possible the other way around.
So what people don't really understand is pretty much all of the government comes down to a handshake and a wink. Meaning we kind of it just works just because we choose for it to work. And what Andrew is really getting at, you kind of laid it out perfectly himself, is men are the enforcers of the rights. And I hear a lot of feminists is like, oh, well, you don't think women can enforce their rights? No, they can't, because as men as a collective decided to, hey, we're done, you don't get rights anymore, fuck off. Men can do that and not have to worry about the consequences from women, because what can women really do? They really can't do anything. And I'm not trying to it's just the nature of us is women aren't able to defend themselves to the same degree, and to an extreme less degree, in my opinion, than men can do. You'll never see a female revolution. Okay, people talk about the suffragettes and all that stuff. Well, that was able to have fruition and was able to come to pass due to men, not women. Yes, there were suffragettes who came out and did the political shit and made a bunch of noise and stuff, but if it weren't for men backing them, it wouldn't have come to fruition regardless. You have never heard of a female-led revolution or female, like, all the main command structure, a female-led revolution. I don't think I've ever heard of one. I could be wrong, but I don't think I have. By female-led, I mean, like, a majority of the command structure is female-based, not they had a female leader. I'm saying a majority of the female command structure. And I've never heard of a female revolution, period, because by revolution, I, of course, mean taking up taking up arms and overthrowing a government by violent means. Never heard of that. It's always men. And so, men are the enforcer of our rights. We can enforce our will onto women and lesser men. But the opposite is not true. Women cannot enforce their will onto men, even lesser men. It's just not possible. And that's basically what Andrew's getting at. And I will admit, his definition of rights are very fairly accurate. There are more entitlements than rights, and they are infringed on all the time. Freedom of speech is infringed on. You got a time, place, and manner. Protests, same thing. Generally, that's you can get infringed in that. Second Amendment's infringed all the time. Fourth Amendment, that's infringed all the time. No real consequences ever happen to that. So, he's real. I really do like his definition of rights. Of they're really entitlements, not rights.
I guess I would disagree that rights are only upheld through force. Like in this day and age, I think that it's easy to say that hypothetically men could turn against women.
See, what she doesn't understand is when it comes down to it, all rights are enforced by force. When it comes down to it, every right is due to force. Okay, because if let's say, why do we follow the gun laws? Because there isn't a force. Even let's say for the Second Amendment, say a gun store ignores the law on guns, and they continue to sell guns to whomever, not going through the background checks and stuff. You'll get the police. You'll get attorneys coming, get lawyers. But eventually, if they continue to ignore it, what's going to have to happen is the enforcement arm, the force, will have to come and enforce the law and that infringes on the rights. And the same could be said in reverse. If you wanted to remove said laws against the on a right, you're going to have to eventually end up using force to unless someone acquiesces, whatever that fucking word, you're going to have someone end up using force to continue that right. So rights are enforced through force, and they are removed by force. It's a yin and yang. And I don't think a lot of women understand that, because women don't really understand the concept of violence between men. It's what they don't.
Women and use like brute strength and brute force to take away rights, but I think that
Sorry.
it's okay. I think that we have a
Are
pretty
you mocking her, Brian?
a pretty well-founded legal system that we use to uphold rights, or our conception of rights. I think I would disagree that rights are only force. I do agree that they are a social construction.
Your legal system is force.
I mean, the legal system, yes, it's force. It's coercion, but
No, it's not just coercion. It's force. So
Yeah.
if absent you doing whatever the legal system determines you must do, what is the remedy?
I mean that's a good point. I just think that. Do you think that rights are enforced like physically? Like, do you think
Yes.
that men? Okay,
Physically.
could you give me an example of that? Because I think I don't really fully
If
understand.
you want to make an appeal that your rights are in some way being taken away from you, or your rights in some way are being violated, who would you make the appeal to?
Supreme Court, I don't know.
And so let's assume whoever you make this appeal to on a court agrees with you. They're going to be able to use the power of their office to appeal to brute force in order to defend or take your right away. So if I want to send you to prison, I'm taking your rights away, right? Does that require force? Physical force?
Yes,
Does it require physical force to keep you there?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that taking someone to prison and keeping someone in prison does require physical force. But I mean, I guess abortion rights. It's a very recent. I fail to see how the right to get an abortion, maybe not the right, because obviously punishing someone who performs an illegal abortion involves taking someone to prison. But how is the right to an abortion upheld by physical force?
Well, because if you go to get an abortion, okay, and somebody comes in to stop you from getting an abortion, meaning they're going to stop you from exercising that right, if that's a right you believe you have, wouldn't you make an appeal to men with guns to come in and stop them from stopping you from doing that?
Okay, I think I understand what you mean now. I think I
don't
fully understand what you mean. But I mean, in that case, women can train to use weaponry and use guns. I mean, we have weaponry.
This is a bad argument for her. Because, okay, women can train and do, yeah, but they're not as effective as men. And the majority of the force users are men, meaning a lot of the police officer, a lot of the enforcement arm is men, okay? So it doesn't fucking matter, okay? Women can go and train and use firearms and stuff, cool. But, there's a lot of different aspects to that. But a lot of the enforcement arm is men. It's a primarily men job. And that's what she doesn't understand. What they're thinking of is, oh, well, I'd appeal to the legal system, and then that would go there and there and there and there. But what she doesn't understand is if the person doing this that is using force to prevent her from doing that, if he ignores all that legal mumbo jumbo, all that handshakes, winks, nudges, eventually what's going to have to happen is someone. It's going to have to come down and force that individual to stop enacting his will on you. And I think that's what a concept a lot of these feminists don't understand. And even if you're a woman, blah, 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 train with a gun and shit. All right, cool. That guy's more than likely going to have the same training. And that training he's going to be more effective at it than a woman is, no matter how hard she trains.
Now that can kind of fill the gap between men and women's.
Everything comes down to actual physical force. And let me explain what I mean. There's not one time in history ever that you can point to where women have been able to collectively use force in order to dominate men. However, every point in history I can almost point to where men can and have done that. And the opposite cannot be true. Meaning that if men in even small collectives decide to take the rights away from women, there's not actually anything women can do about it. However, if women mildly and collectively, or in a small or large collective, try to take the rights away from men, there is something they can do about that.
But I do think that would require somehow taking weaponry out of the picture. I mean, but
you don't need to take weaponry out of the picture. Weapons require strength to use. Those who are strong can use them better. Not only that, field equipment weighs a lot, right? Equipment in general weighs a lot. You also have the endurance problem, the skeletal problems. You have the heat regulation problems. The distinctions between men and women are incredible. And so when you look at a force applicator, men have a monopoly on force. By the way, I can demonstrate this pretty easy. Western nations have become more egalitarian than they ever have been. You would agree, right?
Yeah.
But who still stays predominantly in these enforcement positions?
I mean, predominantly, yes, but
Why?
Women... Well, obviously, I totally agree with you that there is a physical difference between men and women, and they are stronger. But I do think that the gap is significantly smaller with weaponry.
No.
I don't think it's fully,
No, it's not at all. All she's thinking of is two people taking a gun and firing. But there's a lot to go in with a gun to be accurate. Generally, if a woman wants to be fairly accurate, they're going to need a lower caliber firearm, like a 38. Well, a guy can fire fairly accurately with a 45. Okay. There's a difference, all right? Like my wife, she needs a 380 ACP for her gun, and I remember actually I remember this. I took her to the gun range. We fired. We had her fire a 380 ACP. I want to say that's her gun, and a 9mm one, which is what I fire, and she had trouble with the 9mm one. She also had trouble racking the slide and doing a bunch of that stuff. And she fired far more accurately with the 380 ACP. She fired more accurately. It was a lot easier for her to pull the slide back. I remember her commenting saying, it's a lot harder to pull the slide back for this 9mm than it is for the with this 380 ACP. I remember that distinctly. Now you could try and chalk that up to because I think the 9 she was shooting was a Glock, and then what she ended up buying? Is it a Walter? No, I don't think it was a Walter. I think I ended up buying her a SIG 380 ACP. I could be wrong. Anyways, so you could say, oh, that's a gun manufacturer, but I don't think it is. Because any 9mm I fire, it's supremely more difficult. Not for me, but I can tell the difference when racking back the slide of a 9 than any other. All right, sorry, I'm rambling.
Brought to an equal playing field, but
in other words, if men have weapons and women have weapons, women lose.
I mean, yeah, but there are women in law enforcement.
Yes.
There are female prison wardens, CO.
Yeah, but first off, let's back that up. The prison wardens and prison correction officers, they're in a women's only prison. All right. Yeah, or at least they're in the women section. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but a lot of women aren't in the male side. I could be wrong about that. I don't know the ins and outs of the prison system, but I'm pretty sure it's the women take care of the women, and the men take care of the men. Now, female officers, how many times have you seen a female officer go against a man and they get throttled? I can't remember which video it was, but there's this video of these 2 female cops. They're trying to arrest this guy, and he basically just shakes them off, and they try that they can't do nothing until a male cop comes and takes the guy down. So, there's always conflation, like when we're talking about force is like, all right, yeah, but there's female officers. All right, yeah, there are, but they're not as effective as male officers. I mean, for example, if you're getting beat up by your boyfriend, are you going to want a woman cop to show up, or you want a big, strong guy to come show up? All right, are you going to be more relieved to see a woman chick come up, or are you going to be more relieved when that 6 foot pound of 200 pound of muscle shows up? Like, which one are you really going to be excited to see? All right, so there's always this just like, oh well, women are in police force, yeah, but they're not that effective in it. Okay, and they overwhelmingly end up getting tossed around by male suspects, and they end up having to reach and use their deadly force instruments far more often, I would say, than the male ones do when confronting another male suspect, or when confronting a male suspect. And again, okay, sure, there's a few female cops, but the majority of that enforcement is done by who? Men. That's why there's police, there's law enforcement job offers that are female only recruitments. That's why.
Things like that. So
and they are, and while there are some exceptional women, I agree, who can be inside of positions like this, there are some exceptional women. Maybe one day we'll have that first female Navy SEAL. Maybe it'll happen. Okay, wait, it hasn't happened yet, but one day there will be an exceptional Navy SEAL, badass G.I. Jane type chick who can wear the skin tight leather with the hand grenades and do the ninja kicks. But those are going to be exceptional cases.
I agree that they are exceptional cases, but you're saying, so men are the default enforcement arm of rights, of legal rights, but there are women in those positions. So I fail to see.
What she fails to understand is while there are women in those job fields, there are far more men. So the men can just overpower the women and remove them from those job fields fairly easily. Okay. But the same cannot be said against women. And I don't think Andrew made this point. But I would say that's a good point. It's like, yes, there are female officers and whatnot, but there are far fewer than men. And there's nothing preventing the men except their own benevolence to keep the women in those jobs and not just sweep them away.
And
because men can take them away from them collectively whenever they so choose. And they have no recourse, but men always do, which is force.
Collectively, sure. But I mean, there are still exceptions to that. So that there are women in those positions. And by and large, men are stronger than women, but there are weak men and there are strong women. And I feel that, I mean, the exceptions to those cases do present a problem.
But even weaker men, even much weaker men are still.
No, those exceptions are not going to be a hindrance on the majority. Those exceptions are a minority, and they're such a small minority that there's such a small minority that there's different standards for men for men and women in police and military. So the physical requirements are lower. So it's not, it's so like the few exceptions of women that reach male standards are so few that they haven't changed those standards, and it's still men and women, like different standards.
Usually stronger than even average women.
Remember, the exception doesn't take away from the rule; it proves the rule. Because if there was no exception, or because if there was no rule, there'd be no exception. And an exception means that this deviates from the norm, which is the rule.
And
I
this
agree with that.
is the problem with equalization. For instance, if you were to have a prison, okay, or let's try this a different way. Let's say that you were a general in the armed forces, and you had a special forces unit which was compiled of 100% women and one that was compiled of 100% men. And you had a job which you absolutely had to get done. It was critical. It was mission critical. Who would you turn it over to?
I would turn it over to a man.
You turned it over to the men because they would be much more excellent performing those duties than women, right?
Yeah, and I can totally agree with you on that. But I do think that the presence of women in those positions, I mean, they are present in those positions.
So,
And also, I guess my question would be, do you think that the enforcement of rights is the most important part of like a well-functioning society? Like, do you think that is...
The enforcement of law and order is critical to society. So the Greeks said, without law, there is no freedom, right? You would agree that that's probably true.
I think in my opinion, it's very critical. I'd say the enforcement of law is the foundation of a well-run society. Because again, without law, there is no civilization. So I would say it's probably the most important, but maybe some people might disagree. Maybe they'd have a good argument for that. But I would say for the most part, yeah, enforcement is probably the foundation of everything. And if the foundation is weak, everything falls.
True. I don't see how you could really descend into anarchy and have actual freedom. It would just end up in like a slave eat slave oppressive, this type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that law and the enforcement of law and rights and the enforcement of rights or duties and the enforcement of duties are critical to a society. So while I don't believe in the construction of rights because they don't really exist absent force, I do understand that having some kind of core belief towards something can be useful in keeping a cohesive society together. But I don't believe that women are capable of doing that. And so because they're not equal, they cannot be equal because of this. I don't understand why they should have equal rights to vote, why they should have equal rights to men if they are not in the position where they can actually enforce their own rights and only men can.
I guess I fail to see how women cannot physically enforce their own rights leads to
because
women should not have equal rights, or an egalitarian society is not possible. Because I mean, even the way you said it, law and order is only one critical aspect of a well-functioning society. So if that's only one critical aspect, then how can you say, well, this one aspect and the fact that men are going to dominate this one aspect, they're not going to be the sole, that women will exist, but men will dominate this one aspect. How can you say that?
Because they're always going to be making the appeal to men for those rights, and there's no way around it. And so men can collectively take the rights away from women, period. They just can. There's nothing that women can do about this. So egalitarianism in and of itself would just be an illusion. It would literally be a lie. You would be walking around saying that you're equal with men. You have equality with them, but at the same time necessarily having to appeal to them for that equality, which it makes it contradictory, right? How do you appeal to the thing for equality while at the same time saying that you're equal?
So you think that the fact that women have to appeal to men for their equality means that there shouldn't be an attempt at like an egalitarian society? Well,
what is the attempt? It would be an illusion, right? Men can just collectively take it away, but women cannot do that to the opposition. Only men can. So men can take away men's rights, and men can take away women's rights, and men can give men rights, and men can give women rights, but women can't give men rights nor take men's rights away.
I mean, if I just think it's easier to say that our system of rights, I mean, I know that I agree with you that our rights are sort of a construct, but we do have in practice legal rights. I find it hard to just say that, like, well, that's all an illusion, because we're living it every day. I mean, we have legal rights.
No, it is an illusion. Our entire government, is run on handshakes, winks, and nudges. Okay, it's just an agreement we have. Okay, if one person decides, if like one section decides, we're not going to listen to you anymore, we're going to do what we want, there's not much we can do besides an enforcement, using force to force our will onto that section. And I don't think she understands that. Like everything that comes that happens in government, everything, the whole society comes down to we're just agreeing to do it. But if we decide not to, there's not much we can do besides enforcement.
You commit a crime, you go to jail. I mean, that is all a social construct, but we're living it. I mean,
You're talking about a descriptor of is and ought. It is true. We go through life with all sorts of kind of presuppositions and suppositions which aren't true all the time to get through the day. We do this all the time. For instance, there's no real reason for you to go in and turn your car on and think it's going to start, except that you're a pattern recognition machine and it's always started. And so you assume that it's going to start. If you had some pre-knowledge that it wouldn't, you would have taken the steps to make sure that the next day you got in and it would start, right? Everything that you do in your life as you're going through it is built on all sorts of unfounded suppositions that probably aren't true at all, but we still act as though they are in order to have a society. But eventually what ends up happening is we do have to face down actual facts and actual reality. And in actual reality, if you end up with too much internal conflict based around this egalitarian system, what's actually going to prevent men from just taking away women's rights altogether? There doesn't seem like there's anything that would stop that from happening.
I mean, that would require like widespread, like mass violence by men against women.
Why would it require any violence?
I mean, okay, because if you're saying it wouldn't require violence, then you're giving some kind of like, you're admitting that this system of legality that we have has some kind of like.
No, I'm just saying that if it is true that men can, by use of force, and I think most women know this, could do this. Why, if they decided to, do you think that women would, what do you think they could do about it? Take to the street with their little signs and say, please don't?
But I don't, to me, that sounds like you're saying it would be an act of violence. How are men going to take away women's rights without violence?
If men collectively tomorrow say women have no more rights, what are the options left to women?
I mean, legal, political exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Again, appealing to men. Because let's say you do your legal and political stuff, but all the men there, again, he said the collective, all the men decide no. So all the men in those various positions, because they're in the, generally in the leadership areas and stuff, they would just be like, cool, no. And what would women have? Okay. They would just, all the women in the legal and whatever processes, if they went no, because again, it's the collective, not just a minority. What do women have to do? What can they do?
And in that case, you say men are stronger. They could exercise violence against women to take their rights away.
They may not need to exercise any violence. All they may need to do is just say, you no longer have the rights, and women really just can't do anything about it. They could maybe collectivize with signs, but what happens if they're just ignored or laughed at or scoffed or mocked, and they can't really take violence to men? So in political action, right, there is always what is called the violent alternative, and men can always appeal to that alternative. It's a terrible thing. I'm not advocating for that. I'm giving a descriptor for what is true. This is something which can be appealed to for men, but only for men. Women can only do small scale. So even in kind of the craziest feminists you can think of, the best they were able to do is like send some boom booms in the mail and this kind of thing. But they couldn't really push back against a structure of strength. It wasn't really possible for them to do. You see the voting gap as it begins to widen, as men become more right wing and women more left wing. What happens eventually if what is considered the patriarchy has been pushed against just decides one day, no more rights for women?
I think in that case there would be political opposition, and I think there would be white.
There would be women. She keeps missing this point. There would be women that would be opposed, yes, that are politics, but the majority of men in the politics are men. Okay, so they would too be able to overrule whatever the woman says and says no.
Widespread collective political opposition from women. And if you say that's futile because men can just...
Why? Where's the widespread political opposition in the Middle East where they have no rights? They're not allowed. The thing is you presuppose that women will be allowed to go out and have picket signs, or presuppose that women can go out and protest, presuppose that women will still be able to have the same functions they have now if men collectively say no. And I'm telling you, I don't think that that's the case. Everything down from the husband inside of the home to the boyfriend inside of the home to the actual structure of government, all enforcing collectively, or even a small collection, maybe 10%. I think women can't really do anything.
I mean, I would agree they can't do anything physically, but that would require men to collectively decide to use violence against women. And I don't.
No, it wouldn't. She doesn't understand that. They would just ignore you. Like, that's what she doesn't understand. They would just say no. Okay? They wouldn't have to use force against women. They would just say no. Okay?
I don't believe that most men would be willing to use violence against women for political
means. Then
means.
If that's true, why the hell did you need feminism?
Because I don't think that it was about violence. I think that it was about a lack of political rights, if I can use that word.
Well, then, but we
Political
already
entitlements.
we've already discerned that rights are force.
Mhm.
So if we've discerned that rights are force, and you say that we want more rights, it means that you want to have more force.
Sure.
So then you needed feminism, right? Feminism was a way for you to have force.
Yeah. I mean, I think that social movements like collective political
But why
action
do you
can
need-
approximate
For
force
sure. But
for
what do you
women.
need force for? If you're saying that men collectively would not move against women using force, why the hell do you need force then?
I think that they would collectively move against women using force. I'm saying
Well,
like
then you just contradicted
well,
yourself.
I'm talking more in a political force sense. I don't think that men
What
in
is
general
political force?
I think the use of like rights, things like that, like restricting rights, restricting mobility, disenfranchisement,
That's
things
all
like
force.
that. It's all backed up with force, but I don't think it always necessarily translates to a one-to-one.
It is force, because absent force, law has no bite. So if somebody says it is the law that you not do X, but there's no enforcement if you break the law, is that a law?
I mean, is enforcement always violence? Like, is enforcement
Always must be backed with physical violence for a law or for any type of right, period.
maybe backed with the threat of? But do you think that all enforcement
Well,
takes place solely through the threat of physical violence, or do you
Yes.
think there are social?
Yes. Okay. Because if I can because the only reason I don't speed is not because I might get a fine. It's because eventually it's gonna end up like if I keep speeding, ignore, eventually, force is going to have to happen, and force always ends with a bullet. Okay, that's what's gonna happen. Because if I keep speeding, what's gonna happen? Eventually, they're gonna send me to jail. Okay, no matter how many times I fucking or they're going to remove my license, my privilege of driving, which would require force. And if I keep ignoring that, they're going to force me to go to jail. Okay, again, this is the problem with when they don't understand violence between men. Okay, they don't understand it because they don't experience it really. They don't understand true violence. But yeah, every law we have ends in a gun. It ends with a bullet. Okay, because if you ignore it, force is going to have to happen. Okay, doesn't matter how big, how small the law is. It all ends at the end at the end of a bullet. Right? Every law.
No,
mechanisms.
all of it. It has to be backed with the physical prowess of enforcement. Otherwise, why couldn't it just be ignored?
I mean, I think that there are things beyond the threat of physical violence that can. I agree with you that the threat of physical violence is what backs the majority of our laws.
No, not the majority. All laws. Can you name a single law that does not end with force?
Do you not think there's also
I'm willing to bet she can.
a social aspect of like appropriateness and like wanting to be perceived in a certain way, wanting to keep with
You're
norms,
asking
customs?
about social norms.
Yeah.
Sure, but if there's a violation to a social norm, absent a law, that's one of the problems we have in society now, right? Which is there's no law which prevents you from moving outside of a social norm.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is the case, then nothing's preventing you. So let's say, for instance, there's no law which says that it's illegal to go out and dig up a dead body and do a dirty deed to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You agree that there will be people who do.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. But wouldn't it be better for us to have a law and force saying if you do this, there's going to be severe punishments for you?
Yeah.
So the social norm itself is not the enforcement. It's always the force.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that. I guess I still am stuck on how that means that we can't have an egalitarian society. Okay. I guess I should ask.
You would have the illusion of egalitarianism, but you never actually have egalitarianism. That will always be a product of the mind and never a product of objective reality.
Okay. So is your view of feminism that it is pointless because there
Yes.
can never be egalitarianism?
Well, so you just earlier,
Mhm.
and no offense, I'm just going to point this out so that you
Okay.
know, you spoke out of two sides of your mouth. You said, I don't believe that men would collectively come together to use some kind of force against women. But when I asked, why would you need feminism? Then you said, well, because we need to have some kind of force to protect ourselves from the patriarchy. Well, both of these things cannot be true at the same time. This is where we come to what we call Schrodinger's feminist, which is I'm a strong, empowered woman, but also a victim at the same exact time. And it can't really be both. It has to be one or it has to be the other. So if you're a strong, empowered woman, and what it is that you want is some type of equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I think we've just discovered that that's not even a possibility. So what's really going on is you want some sort of political power, right? But you can't enforce the political power.
Well, that is, and when I say that equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I mean political power because I don't think that men will collectively decide to use violence against women. So
they do it all over the world all the time.
Well, yes, on an individual level. I don't think collectively.
On a collective level.
Okay, so what do you think the solution to that should be for women?
Well, I think the first solution is you should understand that what you're doing is you're fighting the patriarchy by at the same time appealing to it. So if you and I can agree that force itself is political power, and that force itself is always going to be monopolized by men, then you've described a patriarchal system. If that is the case, and you say you want more political power, then you are actually appealing to a patriarchal system to give it to you, because they're going to be the enforcers, right?
I can agree with that. I don't think it's good. I don't enjoy
So why
that
not just
situation.
have patriarchy? If that's the case, that you're appealing to it anyway in order to enforce your rights inside of it.
Sorry. Hold on. Sorry. Was messing with some stuff back here.
Why not just submit to patriarchy?
Because I mean, me personally, I would rather not. I would not like to see the outcomes from a system that works like that. I wouldn't like to see women, I guess, in general, relegated to the domestic sphere. I wouldn't like to see the levels of,
When you say domestic sphere, what do you mean?
the home, like child rearing. Me personally, I have no problem with that. That's what I see in my future, because
what could be more important than that?
For me,
No, for
nothing.
women.
I mean, for women, I think that should be up to the individual woman.
Yeah,
because-
I understand that you think. Well, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I think that the key here is not to say that is bad, but I do think that sort of socially enforcing that is the only opportunity for women is bad, because not every woman will be fulfilled by that and will be happy in that position.
What job do you think is more important in society than being a mother?
I would agree that being a mother is the most important
Then
job.
how are you relegating women to the home? If the most important societal job we can give them is motherhood, how is it a demotion? How is it
even a gilded cage is a cage. Like if a woman doesn't want to do that,
well, but
that's
there's
relegation.
never been women are not forced to stay at
No,
home and give birth.
they're
They've
not
always
forced,
been
but
able to work. They've always been able to work.
There's
They've
definitely social pressure, and they're
good. We need social pressure.
Hey, Sean, thank you for the gifted 20 memberships. Appreciate it. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I would disagree that we need social pressure to keep. I mean, I'm sure you'll reference a decline in birth rate and
Mhm.
decline in the birth rate. I don't really know, but I think that it's a biological impulse to have kids. I don't think people are going to stop having kids.
But they're stopping having kids.
Maybe at
like-
a slower rate.
No, at a huge rate. Like South Korea, you know what the birth rate is there?
And I've heard in South Korea, it's
below.
it's a movement,
It's
an
below
intentional-
single replacement.
yeah, and I've
So-
heard that's an intentional movement on the part of women, which I mean that could be an example of women
But
exerting
wait,
force,
I thought we didn't need pressure
pressure to make people have kids.
because people are going to continue to reproduce. You just said no
Well-
matter what, and then you point to a political movement where they stop.
Okay, no, I'll give you that, I guess. But in that case, women are successfully exerting some kind of political pressure.
But what
political force
happens
against
if
men.
men in South Korea say no?
I mean, that would involve like forcible. That would involve rape. I mean,
Why would it involve rape?
how else could you force a woman to?
Well, they could do
be
it through incentivization. They could just say things like, you can't work, so you have to get married if you want to survive in this world. They could do things like that, where it would be coercion, but would not be that. We can't say that word, by the way, but
sorry.
essay would not be essay. So what I'm saying is that there's all sort of incentives which can be put down. So you appeal to a woman's biology and the fact that she wants to have children, but you also dismiss indoctrination. And there's a huge indoctrination program that tells women to have a nest egg before they get married. And so their early years, in their 20s, they're not having kids. They wait until they're in their 30s. The average marriage age now is 31, I believe, in the United States. It's over 30. That's not really very good for child rearing. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I don't. Why is that not good?
Because your most fertile years are behind you.
But if we're still having children at replacement rates,
We're not. We're
but
way
do,
under
do you think that's
replacement rates.
because women are waiting later to have children?
Yeah, well, it's because of materialism. So the reason that this occurs is, I'll explain it to you so that you know. If you can have the procreative function, right, and all the fun that comes with it without the side effect of children, a lot of people opt to do that because of hedonism and because of materialism. There's no, society's devolving into nihilism because there's no greater pursuit for people to have. Religiosity is bashed at every corner. God is considered to be something which is an outlandish fairy tale, and there's no higher authority for people. So materialist nihilism is what society's being reduced to. So people are looking at a sense of self more than they're looking at an extension of family.
I guess I'm curious about a couple of things. Where is the proof that this is happening and that there is this big information campaign to keep women from having children in their 20s? And also, where is it coming from?
Well,
and
the
why?
all the original feminists who were on the suffragette side, if you go back and you read their writings, you can find them in a great book called Cult Feminism. They express over and over again that the nuclear family is the most dangerous part of women's liberation because it breeds a patriarchal system. And so that is what they were pushing against, was a nuclear family. They did not like that at all. So that's proof one. Proof two is that I can go back to the 90s when the United States was really pushing student loans, especially towards women, and in the 2000s towards women. And you saw the expression of feminism in what would be considered, I think, third wave at that time, telling women to wait until later in life until they had something to fall back on because their husbands were going to leave them.
It does happen.
Well, the husbands aren't initiating the divorces. The wives are initiating the divorce.
Men do absolutely initiate divorce, but do you think that there's no fault in those instances? Do you think men were completely innocent?
Well, it's good that you bring up no fault.
I'm talking about no fault divorce.
Right, because no, of course, there's going to be times where men are at fault for the relationship dissolving. But when we look, I mean, we can look at these on a case-by-case basis, and we do. So we have all sorts of attorneys and judges and, polling groups who talk to these various divorced couples who they track and who they get remarried to. And the number one reason that they're getting married or divorced is irreconcilable differences. And oftentimes there's no abuse, there's no drug use, there's no abandonment, there's no nothing. She just doesn't like him anymore and decides to move on to somebody else. So when we look at the data, that's what we're seeing. What we're not seeing is that men are out, rampantly cheating or beating up their wives or doing any of this. And the reason it's so terrible that they initiate divorce for self is because most of the time they have children in these relationships, and it does huge damage to the kids. And so this is what I mean by selfish materialism.
I mean, I guess I still fail to see like the proof that there is an orchestrated campaign of nihilism and of, because I mean, like there's been the word nihilism wasn't invented in the last 10 years. Like I guess I'm curious why you think this is like a brand new thing.
Well, so it's a fruition of, it is true old philosophy, but it is a fruition of it now. You do see a rejection of God all over the United States and a push from the secularists to remove God from any sort of public sphere. You would have to agree that that's true. They want every symbol out of court. They want God off the dollar bill. They want God out of schools. Any place that there is any reference to God there is a secular push.
I'm probably not the person to ask. I really haven't seen this happening, but
You haven't seen that happening?
I have not seen this happening. I think
you haven't seen the endless demands to tear down the 10 Commandments from various courthouses.
That's one thing that I really do think is that I think a lot of this stuff is happening more on the internet than it's happening in real life.
This is happening in real life.
I think that these culture war debates are really happening more in people's heads than they are. I
want to give a shout out to Mr. Sandman 75. Thanks for the follow.
In real life, because I mean,
they put a statue of Baphomet up in San Francisco, a satanic state. That was not on the internet. That was in real life. They put a Baphomet statue up, and all over the United States, Satanists will do this as a mockery to Christianity and endlessly secularists demand that the 10 Commandments be taken down in courtrooms, that religious symbolism be rejected all over the United States. This is not an internet phenomenon.
I think the internet phenomenon is the interpretation of it, because Satanists, I do not actually believe in Satan. I think
they don't.
Exactly.
They're secularists.
Yeah.
That makes my point, though.
But
if you guys don't mind, I will bring it back to the topic at hand.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. Why don't we do this? So how do you guys what's your definition of feminism? And we'll start with you.
Well, I think we agreed on the definition that feminism is to promote the equality of men and women.
And that the entailment of that is a destruction of patriarchal systems.
Sure. Yeah.
And you do consider yourself a feminist, correct?
I do.
Okay. And you mentioned the patriarchy. One of the tenets, at least my understanding of feminism, is the patriarchy theory. There's a patriarchy. Do you agree with that there is a patriarchy?
Yeah, she agrees.
Yes.
Yeah. And so can you give us a definition of what the patriarchy is?
In my understanding,
I think, Andrew, you provide one too.
I think that the patriarchy colloquially describes like a male-dominated culture, male-dominated systems. I think like technically it's just like patrilineal descent.
The father. Yeah.
But I think that, I would say male-dominated culture, male-dominated systems. I think it's just kind of used to describe the ways that men have been in power.
Describing
and
ordered systems where men are in charge.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Andrew?
Sure.
And under the patriarchy, I mean, do you view that women are oppressed?
I think absolutely globally. I don't know how much I feel that applies in the United States today, but globally, absolutely.
And Andrew, do you think that women are oppressed in the United
States? It depends on what we would consider oppression to be.
Right. Well, let's start there. How do you define oppression?
I would say probably the unjust wielding of power by one group over another to prevent them from acting in their free will.
I'm sorry I have to do this, but I do have to get a little bit into your presupposition there. What is justice?
I mean, that's a philosophical debate.
But you're appealing to it.
Yeah, I would say that justice is at its very core definition, probably just closer to the definition of equality, like equal treatment.
So anything which is unequal is oppression.
Depends on what you mean by unequal, I guess. Like if two people
you believe that egalitarianism
perform unequally, on a test, no, I don't think that would be oppression.
So then, what is justice?
Honestly, I don't think I have a good definition for justice in the. I'm curious what your definition of justice is.
Well, for me, I would make an appeal to Christian ethics in order to make a determination of what is or is not just. But in your case, right, you don't have anything that you can appeal to, do you? You just appeal to what? Nothing?
No, but I mean, don't you think that's kind of a cop-out that you can say, well, God told me what justice is. It's Christian ethics. But you can't.
How could you ever say that my justification is not good enough for you who has no justification?
That is fair if you're talking about me directly.
For all of it will reduce to essentially relativism from your end. Absent any type of religion, it's going to be relativism. There's no moral standard you're going to be able to appeal to.
I think that's true.
Okay, go ahead and try to appeal to a standard that's not relativism.
Like a moral standard, I think minimizing harm.
That's relative. What's harm?
Well, I would take more thought. But I mean, what is the Christian like moral standard?
The Christian moral standard is divine command, and this is based on the understanding that knowledge itself cannot exist absent God. It's an X to Y argument. So it would say that the argument, it would be...
Rose donated $200.
This is specifically why whatever podcast is, it sucks. Andrew's right getting into his point, and then some stupid fucking talk to text comes out.
Brian, this layout is awesome. These would be great to consider having more of with you mediating / asking questions between two guests.
Thank you, Rose. Yes, I want to do more of these whatever debate formats. We've done a few in the past. And thank you, Rose. Appreciate the TTS. Continue.
Okay. So in any case, regardless of what I would appeal to, even if I said I appeal to a flying spaghetti monster in the sky, I really don't have to justify that. If there's no justification on your end for what is a moral standard, I don't have to justify mine then either. Why would I need to? If we're both just in relativism, then anything that I assert as being correct is just as valid as anything you assert as being correct.
Okay, but I mean, so would you agree that what I'm asserting, anything I can assert can be just as correct as what you're asserting?
If it's absent a justification, there just wouldn't be a reason for me to justify. So then what I would need to do then is appeal to force. And so if I were to make an appeal to force, we've already established that we have the monopoly on force, and you can't make a moral argument because you're a relativist. Where are we left?
I mean, so do you discount any secular...
Hang on, answer my question.
Sorry, ask the question again.
Where are you left if you're a relativist? You can only appeal to relativism. My worldview has to be just as valid as yours. So then therefore we both appeal to physical force. What else could we ever appeal to?
Honestly, I am not totally sure how we get from there to appealing to physical force.
Because what else could you appeal to other than just an enforcement to your preferences?
Appeal to for what?
For any ought. Every ought would just become force. You would just say the things I want to see different in the world are because I want to see them different in the world. And then that would require force. So relativism will reduce to a force doctrine.
But I'm curious why Christian ethics wouldn't also reduce to a force doctrine.
Well, the Christian ethic can make a determination between an is and an ought. So we would make the ought claim that you should not utilize force for what we would consider oppression, which is hardly patriarchy. That's not oppressive. But yeah, we would make a justified moral claim. And that's how we would move forward in a moral conversation or in not. But from your case, it's total and complete relativism. And you know it's relativism. Whatever worldview you come up with, absent religion, it's going to reduce to relativism. And so we're just going to be right back to force again.
I mean, what if God isn't real?
Then
do you think that has any effect on...
the same justification you do to appeal to force.
So could I not make up my own thing that tells me what is right and wrong, and I can lead back to that? It won't be relativism because I have this thing. That would be relativism, yeah. I'm curious how that's different from saying that it comes from God.
Because there's philosophical proofs for God. If there's no philosophical proofs that you could present for whatever your flying spaghetti monster is, then we would reject it.
I don't know if we want to... I'm actually curious what the philosophical proofs that God exists would be. Or you mean philosophical proof that...
Before we get into it...
Yeah, that might be a little...
Yeah, before we would get into a philosophical proof, though, just remember, I don't have to justify one because you don't have to justify one. So there's no... In other words, coming to me and asking me, can you make a justification for a thing which I can't justify? Why would I need to do that? We would just assume immediately that you disbelieve whatever my justification would be, right? Because you don't hold it, right? So you don't believe it. So if that's the case, we're still going to be reduced to just appealing to force again.
Okay, but then that puts us on equal footing with our
If
ethics.
It puts us on equal footing with our ethics, and both of us are appealing to force, then ultimately, if men decide to utilize force and they have the monopoly on force, you can't make a single moral argument for why that would be wrong.
So you disagree that patriarchy is oppression?
Yeah, okay, but hang on, before we move the goalpost.
No, that was a question.
I'll answer the question, but I asked you one first. And the question I asked was, if it is true that we've reduced it all to relativism, if it is true that all we can do now is appeal to force, and if it is true that men have the monopoly on force, then if men used their force monopoly to oppress women, you couldn't make a single moral argument against that, could you?
I think that you could.
Then do so.
I did not come prepared with a moral argument, honestly, but I think that there are philosophers and people who are experienced at debating.
But you couldn't.
I couldn't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you disagree that patriarchy is oppression?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, do you think that oppression exists? Do you think that people are oppressed in the world?
Depends on how we want to relay what is oppression. So is oppression just not having the entitlement of rights? Is that just what oppression is? Or is oppression that some people have other rights than other people do?
I mean, my original definition of oppression didn't stand because I couldn't define justice, but I would say...
Well, justice is super hard to define, so I'm not beating you up about that.
No, I know. I think that I would say it's keeping one group from being able to exercise their will in a way that another group is not kept in that position. So one group can't do the same thing. They can't exercise free will the way another group can. I think that would be oppression.
To exercise free will in the same way that another group can?
Yeah, sure. You
can
are
you
not
exercise your free will the same way that Congress can?
No.
Are they oppressing you?
Well, maybe. Honestly, I mean, it does. I think that government does imply some form of oppression.
Well, then ultimately, wouldn't you have to advocate for some kind of bizarre utopian ideology where everybody is completely equal? There's no leadership. There's no government. There's no nothing. Wouldn't that ultimately be what your goal would have to be then?
No, I mean, that's fair. Yeah.
And that doesn't sound like that's what you want.
No, not particularly.
Yeah. So if we move it back, then maybe we can come up with a different form of oppression.
I think it's difficult to I'm not sure what the dictionary definition of oppression is, but so
I mean, if you've got your phone, I don't care if you look it up. If you want to have a working definition, we can go off of. Okay.
But so men being able to exert force whenever they would like over women, whether they choose to or not, is not oppression to you. You don't think that constitutes the oppression of women. Men being able to
no, it's an entailment of their ontology. So they're able.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
they are able to make a distinction and say that the what you are and what they are different, and them applying physical force to their aims is the same thing that you appeal to. So if that's true, I don't see how they're oppressing you. What you're trying to do actually would be the oppressive thing, right? Because you want to take them and have them enforce your will.
I mean, I think that it would be there's an unequal amount of force there.
There is, but that's baked into the pie of what is,
just because it's baked in. I mean, that could still be oppression, right? I mean, like,
I don't see how it's oppressive for men to move into men's interests and understand that force, that they have a monopoly on force. It doesn't mean that they couldn't be benevolent towards women. That doesn't mean that they have to give them equality either, nor that not giving them equality means that they're oppressed. I don't see how that's oppression unless we're using, not at least not by your, well, I guess by your definition it would, but basically everything would be. Like if you and I don't have the same tattoo parlor, I guess that would be oppression because it's unequal. I don't.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying that would be the outcome. The cause of oppression would be the exertion of force that leads to one group not being able to exert, the same amount of rights, exert.
Then we're just back to force
way.
again. So then what it's really a fight about is force. Is that feminism really is you wanting to use the force of the patriarchy to attack itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of inevitable. I don't think that disproves like the goal of feminism or
yeah, but why should they do that?
Why should they? I mean, I guess women's self-interest. If men have a self-interest to exert their will and use their biological strength over women, then can you not say that women have a vested interest in pushing back against that and trying to claim some kind of autonomy, some kind of...
You could say that, but you're going to end up with this problem, which is if that's true, and it's just a game of force between the sexes with the weaker sex attempting to utilize the stronger sex to enforce their rights, then you would have no complaints if you're trying to utilize force for your aims, for them to use force for theirs. And if that's the case, then you're at a huge disadvantage if they ever decide we're going to, because your moral argument goes out the window. And the reason that women and feminism has been so bad for them in the vote is because they used to have a moral high ground, and now they're a political tool because they have to use force. They have to use force for their political ideology, and they never had to before the vote. But now that they're involved in politics, they're literally voting on force doctrine because that's what law is.
So it sounds like women are at a disadvantage in politics.
Well, it sounds like if you really wanted them to not be at a disadvantage, you would remove them from politics because then they could have an actual moral argument.
But I mean, how can you say you're not at a disadvantage in politics if you're not a part of politics at all? You're not advantaged or disadvantaged.
Well, no, they were a part of politics. It's just that they didn't have the right to vote. So they still had women's issues: clean air, clean water, education, health. There was all sorts of women's issues, but they would make moral justifications for those issues, and they had a moral high ground because they weren't appealed to as a voting bloc. For instance, 1920, that's the 19th Amendment. Okay, that was never voted on. There was no referendum by women for their own vote. Now imagine the irony of women getting the right to vote, but they refuse to actually allow them to vote on it.
Yeah, I mean, it is ironic. I would agree.
It's not only ironic, but the reason that they didn't want them to vote on it is because everywhere that they tried those referendums, women voted against it because they didn't want to be political tools, because they knew that they would have to utilize a force doctrine of men. So they would have to vote that men enforce whatever their will was. That's why they didn't want it. That was one of the primary anti-suffragette arguments. And so that's why when I look at egalitarianism and equality, I see it as a great evil, because I see people who basically want to appeal and utilize force against these various groups in order to enforce their will because they can't enforce it themselves.
I mean, I guess I don't see how that makes it evil. It sounds like you don't really think that the use of force is necessarily evil, or the threat of force is necessarily evil.
No, then neither do you. Because you just said 1,000 times that you'll utilize it to get whatever it is that you want.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's evil. I think that. So why is egalitarianism evil?
Well, because egalitarianism is trying to convince women that they're equal to men, while at the same time they have to appeal to men for their equality. It's not only a contradiction, but it's insanity, because it ultimately sets them up for failure, believing that they're equal with a patriarchal system, which could at any time take away whatever their perception is of equality. They can just overnight gone, and there's not really anything women can do about it. It's insane to me to think that a bunch of rich industrialists were able to convince women, and they didn't even really convince them. They convinced congressmen, which is how you got the 19th. But a bunch of rich industrialists convinced women that they were best served being men, and they're not. They're not best served being men. They're not best served out in the workforce. That's not their function. Never really has been their function, and they're just kind of pretending.
But I mean, who's to say that? How can you be the judge of that? That what best serves women is? I mean,
because right now we can look at the current society which we live in, and we can understand how we got here. And we can understand, we'll start with the birth rate, which we talk about quite a bit, okay? Being in the toilet, that's due to anti-natalist feminist policy. And also...
But how can you say that the birth rate declining is not due to pollutants in the water? It's not due to the way we eat, which is
It's due to birth control.
Come on. Like, it's a dumb argument. Yeah, it's due to birth control. Because without birth control, what happens? People make babies. Like, all right, if you just grant her argument, like, yeah, these have some effect, but the greater effect is going to be the birth control, and Andrew makes this argument. Like, okay, sure, let's grant your argument that, okay, pollutants have some effect. What you eat has some effect. But if you remove birth control, then what happens? People get babies. Like, look, I'm not the healthiest either. All right, I eat, bunch of crap, whatever. But guess what? When my wife was on birth control, we didn't have babies. When we got her off birth control, you know what happened? I had babies. Okay, I have not had any issue making babies. I am like literally every single time we've taken my wife off birth control, she's had babies. Like it's really like the argument just doesn't make any sense. Okay, like you could probably attribute it like to a small like an exception where population or not pollutions, crappy food, shit like that could have an effect to a degree, but the far larger effect is the birth control. And any argument otherwise is just dumb. Like I said, like I just saw this and I was like, yeah, like when my wife was on birth control, we never had any. Like we had a few scares, but we've never had any babies while she was on birth control. But once she got off, I'd say like a month or two after she was off and it got out of her system, boom, babies every single time.
But I mean, how can you say that?
Because we have all the data that shows that it's due to
what data shows that eliminates all confounding factors of pollution of.
Because if you take a scale, there's actually a scale, and you can look it up now on your phone if you want to. But you can actually watch when birth control is introduced in the 70s, and you can see the birth rates go right and
But that
marriage
says
rates
nothing about
on a
causation.
massive decline, and the same thing with abortion. So the thing is,
that says nothing about causation.
Okay,
you can put any two
all
things
all causation is a correlate, by the way.
Yeah.
So if we have strong enough correlates, like for instance, I don't know, birth control being a thing which prevents birth, that seems like a really strong core. In fact, could you think of a single stronger correlate than birth control for why we might have a birth decline? One.
Yeah, I do think that pollution, like
pollution,
plastics, yes.
Come on, pollution.
Plastic pollution, yes.
Plastic pollution.
I do think that male fertility is on the decline because of chemicals.
You think
chemicals,
that plastic pollution?
I mean, can you just prove
is
that?
more? Hang on, I just want to make sure I get this right first. You think that plastics in the water and the plastics inside of your system have more to do with the falling birth rate than women on birth control?
Yeah, because I think most women get off of birth control eventually and start having kids.
When?
I don't think honestly, I don't think that it's that much later than it used to be.
It used to be when? Birth control is a new advent. That's something modern.
Oh, you mean so like not okay. The 1970s, I guess.
Yeah, no, they were still having babies in their 20s. The pill was not as widespread as it is now. But I mean, yeah, obviously, birth control would be a much stronger correlate than plastics. Plastics.
I mean, I disagree.
Plastics and male.
Like that doesn't make any sense. I disagree. What are you talking about? If there's no birth control, people get babies. If there's birth control, no one gets babies, for the most part. Like what is birth control? Like 99% effective or some shit like that? Like it's a high degree effective. Okay, so like plastic in the water, it could have some effect to a degree, but the greater degree is the birth control, and it's the part where she just doesn't make any sense.
Fertility? You're saying that it drops male fertility to the point where they can't get women impregnated anymore?
I mean, if all you have to say is there's a strong correlation, I bet you could put up a graph that shows the concentration of plastic in the water or concentration of whatever forever chemicals in the water or in food or whatever, and you could do the same birth rate graph.
Chris donated $200. She said pollution because she wants to win an argument. She's not interested in getting to the actual truth. Thank you again for making feminists look crazy. These clips are going to be great.
I do think that's the actual truth. I genuinely believe that there are more factors to the declining birth rates than birth control. Because I don't think you can really prove that it is birth control because like I was going to say, you could put up the same graph of the concentration of whatever in the water and the birth rate, and I'm sure it would look just as close. So I mean, really what I'm curious is how you prove that these are connected.
Let's test the logic and see if that's the case. If all women went off of birth control tomorrow and had the same amount of sex they're having right now, what do you think would happen to pregnancies?
They would go up.
How much?
Probably by quite a bit.
Like how much do you think quite a bit is?
I have no idea, honestly. Probably a lot.
Now, let us assume for a second that we consumed the exact same amount of plastic that we are right this second, and they all went off of it tomorrow. You're still going to see a huge, massive increase, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now if we were to retract this and say, okay.
Also, pregnancies don't equal birth rate. Because you used to say that all those women wouldn't go out and abort the children.
Okay. But assuming, let's assume there was no abortion. Okay. If there was no birth control, and by the way, abortion is birth control. That is a form of birth control. It's literally lumped in with it. But we were talking specifically about the pill. Yeah. So if it is true that if tomorrow all of them went off of birth control, had the same amount of sex, they would all start getting pregnant, because they would, then your argument that plastics are degrading men's fertility must not be a very good argument.
I mean, I guess you could make the same argument if you took all the plastics out of the water, but all the women were still on birth control.
Yeah,
I believe
what would happen?
I believe
they would all magically get pregnant now.
No, but I do believe that the birth rate probably would increase.
Yeah, but not like it would if you took them off so if you were to get all the plastics out of men's systems, right, and women were still on birth control, still no more babies, right?
Well, no, that's fair. I'm just saying I don't.
But the opposite, lots more babies, right?
So yeah, okay, I will.
So
agree
which
with you
is
that
the stronger correlate?
I will agree with you that it is stronger, but I don't think that you can say that it's the sole cause, or that there is an orchestrated campaign. Because okay, I
don't think he was arguing that it was the sole cause. I think he was arguing that it was the biggest cause, the greater cause, the majority cause of it was the she's arguing right now about degrees, all right? But here's the thing, plastic, maybe 1%. Birth control, probably like what, 90%? So like, and I'm being generous there. Like, so the degree, it's the degree. Like and Andrew's arguing for the majority. So the majority of reason of the declining birth rate, he's saying, is because of birth control. And I don't think you can argue that.
Curious who is behind this antinatalist campaign, and what is the goal to get the birth rate to decline? So
in the 70s, there was, well, I mean, this goes back, but we'll start with what's called the population bomb. Have you ever heard of that book?
No.
Okay. Well, the population bomb was a book which was written by antinatalists who were citing the warning bell, saying that the world was going to become overpopulated and our resources were going to be stretched thin and there was going to be mass starvation across the planet. They started dropping this book, The Population Bomb, all over the world, in third world nations, even. And I mean, it was widely spread in first world nations, and it was adhered to as a looming problem. It was all over the media, and it stayed all over the media. But there was a big problem. And the thing is that while these antinatalists were pushing for this, none of the things which they claimed were going to happen due to the high population actually happened. The opposite happened. It turns out the more people you have, the more hands you have, and the more you can do what are basically logistics, right? So you need truckers, and you need boat captains, and you need farmers, and you need and what's happened, the more people we get, the easier it is to get supplies to people who really need them. And that has been the consequence of a larger population, that you can get your cell phone made in China from parts which come in from all over the world, centralized there. They make them all in a batch. They send them to North America, and all this happens within a couple of days. That's a massive undertaking that requires serious human power to do. The antinatalist movement would have curtailed all of that. And yes, it has been something which has been pushed. The book, The Population Bomb, which you can look up, and you can look up the entire sequence of events behind it, where they were dropping it all over the world. Yes, there was an antinatalism push, and there still is an antinatalism push. One form of antinatalism is trying to convince younger women to destroy their fertile years by going to school and going to college and getting tons and tons of student debt, which they have the majority of student debt over men. It's not even close. And instead of having a family when they're young, that's antinatalism to me.
I guess. Do you think it's like orchestrated with the intent of?
I mean, there's no doubt that the government's handing out student loans, and that the government not only hands out student loans, but really pushes the idea that women should be in school and going for higher education rather than being stay-at-home moms. I see the vilification of the family all throughout media. Not only do I see the vilification of family, but they make men look like bumbling idiots inside of sitcoms and women the heroes constantly. I rarely ever see a nuclear family show anymore where there's a strong patriarchal lead and a typified American housewife.
I mean, I feel like that was always kind of rare. I mean, like I Love Lucy, the classic
I Love
American
Lucy
sitcom
was subversive, but All in the Family was much closer to what an American family looked like than I Love Lucy with Ricky Ricardo and Lucille Ball. Now,
yeah, I mean, that's what I mean.
All in the Family with Archie Bunker was much more kin to probably what your grandma and grandpa's relationship was actually like. So yeah, no, I think that there were shows like, by the way, everybody tune in for that show for that reason, because it was so much closer to the reality of the American family than Lucy goes to the chocolate factory and fucks up for the 8th time this week.
I know. I'm just saying, I don't think these things are new. And I don't think that they're, in my opinion, I don't think they're an orchestrated like antinatalist push. I mean, who's to say that some women's realities are not that their husbands are bumbling idiots? I mean,
there are so many, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of documents which have been published, everything.
Once again, she always, like, this is a typical argument. She's always arguing for the exception. Sure, there may have been a few women that husbands were bumbling idiots, but the majority did not have that. It's typical when female argue. They always appeal to the exception and hate making arguments for the rule.
I mean, everything from CIA projects, which produced antinatalist results and a push for antinatalist results. You might think that that's conspiratorial, even though they're all declassified and you can read them. But yeah, there's been a massive antinatalist movement inside of the United States, pointing right at the feminists who started feminism, who said they wanted to destroy the nuclear family. Having children was slavery. They said it. All of them said it.
Well, that would be feminism. I'm saying, what does the government stand to gain from? Because honestly, I understand what women in the 50s, 60s, and 70s stood to gain from escaping, I guess, the nuclear family. But what does the government stand to gain from demographic
Well,
pressures? And it seems like that would only.
There's only so much of this I can get into because of the platform that we're on. Okay, so I'm gonna have to move off in a second, just because we have to.
Yeah.
But I don't want to leave this hanging. I want to answer it. The federal government itself is at the mercy of lobbying groups. Congressmen and even presidents are essentially bought and paid for, not just here, but in Canada as well. And in South America, where you have lobbying that goes on a different way from drug cartels. But lobbyists themselves hold the keys to the power in the United States government, not the government.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, these lobbying groups, though, especially these feminist think tanks, which go to Congress with these various bills, one of the things that they push are abortion bills and the women's rights to have abortion, right? Right? How is that not anti-natalist policy that's orchestrated, centralized, then handed to the government
Because that's
to
a
pass
human rights
and hand
issue.
out to the? But it's anti-natal. Well, your question though is your question was, right? Is this a conspiracy? Because that's what you're alluding to. This sounds conspiratorial, but it's not. And I just walked you through how it's not.
Okay.
If you agree that there are liberal think tanks, and these liberal think tanks are coming up with new and better ways to streamline the abortion process, abortion most certainly an anti-natalist policy. There's no way you could ever make a claim that it's not. It most certainly is. And then they streamline that policy to politicians who then try to codify it into law. How in the world could this be conspiratorial? It's business as usual.
Okay, well, if you really do, if we're saying that any sort of policy that could be construed as anti-natalist is as under the classification of antinatalism, then sure, I guess I can.
Well, what else is it?
It's a human rights issue. It's a healthcare issue. I don't think any woman.
No, I mean, what else is antinatalism?
Oh, what else? The way I think of it is like an ideology. Are you
What is
saying
the ideology for?
What do you mean?
Isn't the ideology to stop reproduction?
To me, antinatalism would be, yeah, like an ideology that
Well,
is
then
better to.
abortion stops reproduction.
But it's not an ideological thing.
Oh,
Like, it's better to have fewer children.
Of course it is. Of course it's an ideological thing.
No, I think that the people who are fighting for abortion rights are not fighting for it because we should curtail reproduction. I think it's because whether you agree with this or not, women
because they don't want the
women will die.
responsibility of children.
No, because women will die. They'll get unsafe abortions.
There's very few women. Very few women.
No. This is when she kind of derails for me. It's not because, there's, women will get unsafe abortions or anything like that. It's because they want to remove the responsibility, the accountability of, and the consequence of having sex outside of marriage or anything of that nature. Like, that's all abortion is. It's a removal of responsibility from the woman. Oh, well, you don't want this kid. Well, you know what? We'll just abort it. Fuck it. Like, oh, you chose to do a thing, and you don't want to be responsible for the consequences. We'll just remove it. That's all it is. It's a removal of responsibilities from women. That's all abortion is.
And who have to deal with a pregnancy, which is life-threatening. Very few.
That is not true. I do not
It is
think
true.
that's
Yes. It's very few. I think it's like, I'll be generous and I'll say it's like 5% of abortions. I'll be generous. I think really it's 1%, but I'll be generous and say it's like 5%. I'm pretty sure it's 1%, but let's say it's 5%. It's still very few.
true.
The majority of abortions are not done due to life-threatening pregnancies.
I can agree with the majority.
Well, that's
of
what I
abortions
meant.
Are,
I'm sorry.
Sure.
So, but even then, the majority of pregnancies, no, are not life-threatening. Just
Not
so you know.
life-threatening,
But also on the abortion front, no, very few abortions have anything to do with the mother saving the mother's life. Almost none, in fact.
Yeah,
They're the exception to the rule.
I'm saying the people who are promoting, arguing for it, these feminist think tanks are not.
They want it up to 9 months.
They're not, but they're not coming at it with the ideology.
What else could they be coming at it with if they
Women's
want an abortion
healthcare.
at 9 months? That's not healthcare.
Autonomy, the right to choose things along
That's
those
all
lines. Feminism.
But that's what antinatalism, the ideology, is about. It's about
autonomy.
It's
and
about
women's right to
reducing the
choose.
burden on women and on society from other human beings. It's a reduction of the burden. It requires necessarily that you reduce the population. Of course, abortion is antinatalist. Of course, the pill is antinatalist. All of these things are antinatalism. I don't know how you would argue.
Maybe that's just my misunderstanding of what antinatalism is.
Yeah.
Just one question on the abortion topic.
Yeah.
Do you think that is there a cutoff for you in terms of when women can get abortion? Should it be up until the point of right up until birth, or what's your position there?
No, I would say the cutoff for me would be at the point where
Viability?
delivering is an option.
Okay.
If there's a, for instance, if there was a medical emergency, preeclampsia, something like that, if the child can actually be delivered, I would say in that case that you should default to delivery. But there are children.
But would you consider it murder if you didn't?
No,
No. Well, then why? So then I don't understand this. Maybe you can help me out with this.
Yeah.
Why is it, other than just, I don't know, some preference for ick, that if I ask you, if the law says they can get an abortion at 7 months, if you say, no, I prefer that they have it then. I go, okay, but let's assume the law says that they don't have to. Do you consider that murder? You say, no. How is that not?
I think that murder is taking of the life of a person, and I really don't think you have personhood until after birth.
Even at 9 months?
Yeah, I mean, I would
Do you
say
have
that,
to go through the canal? Like, what if,
I mean,
what if your head doesn't quite crown and they just put a shotgun up there? Like,
I-
what, is that, you know,
I would
that's
not, I would
murder?
not like to see that happen. No, I think once their head is out of the canal, yes.
Okay, but
You're
it's
a
not
person.
quite there, right? It's going, she's, ooh, you know,
But I
they're
mean,
about to do a push and he walks in and he just blasts.
But
That's not murder. I'm honest. I want to question. That's not murder.
I think in that case, you'd probably end up killing the woman too. But no,
No, it's a concentrated blast.
no, I think that would be murder. I think that'd be murder.
That would be murder, but not the day before.
I think, I mean, you have to make a distinction.
How is that consistent?
You have to make a distinction somewhere, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you believe
say,
so you believe in like
so the
no
Windows
abortion?
life?
So then why don't we make the distinction at life? Like, what is, like, her entire thing is like, well, I don't consider that a person. So, like, it's like her entire argument never made sense in this at all. Like, she argues about personhood, but you'll find out here pretty soon she can't define what personhood is. So how can you be like, oh, this isn't murder, but I can't define personhood, so therefore I can't really define when it is murder, when it's not murder.
So then when is it a human life?
A human life, I think the possibility of human life begins at conception. I think personhood is different from human life.
And what makes a person?
Being born.
That's it?
No, I think there's biological aspects to personhood, absolutely. So a fetus does have the biological aspects of personhood, but I think there's social aspects, the ability to be a social being, have interactions with other human beings.
Okay, so people in coma aren't people?
People in what?
People in a coma aren't people?
No, there's other aspects as well, like the ability to rationalize, have an awareness of yourself.
People in comas can't rationalize?
I mean, do we take people in comas off life support all the time?
Yeah, but we also leave them alive, and if
Living__ donated $200. Nobody disputes men are the physical enforcers. The issue is the implication. If women control men's actions, women would be the actual enforcement arm, men would just be the proxy. Also prove.pls.
Thank you, Living. Appreciate it. If you guys want to continue on with your point, though, go ahead.
Yeah.
so we were discussing why it is that the day that the shotgun goes up, that's no bueno, that's murder. But the day before, it's not.
Yeah, because I mean, I think you have to make a distinction somewhere. It's inevitable. I mean, you can make the distinction at the day before birth or 2 days before, but you're always going to run into the question of why. And I do think that there are certain, I mean, okay, so if you had the choice between, there's a woman, she is like 27 weeks pregnant, and you can either perform an abortion on her personally, or you could kill a 2-year-old child. You have to do one or the other. Which are you doing?
If you had to do,
yeah, you have to either
so
personally perform an abortion.
So from my perspective, these are morally equal. They're morally equal.
Okay, so which would you do? You have to do
they're
one.
morally equal. So whichever one I picked, from my perspective.
You have to do one. Pick one.
Well, okay, I would pick the abortion, and I would also pick the other one if the abortion
You're going for
was
both?
available. Yeah,
Overachiever.
they're morally equivalent.
Okay,
They're asking me about a morally equivalent question.
but that's why I'm asking you.
Okay, now let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, if
SPK donated $200.
Like, again, these fucking talk to text shit. It's so fucking annoying.
Your baby is due in less than a month and you want to keep it. Someone physically assaults you and the baby dies, but you are barely hurt. What should the criminal be charged with?
just to show you why that dichotomy doesn't work. Remember, I did just answer your question, told you which one I would do, right?
You said you would do both. But...
Okay, no, I'll do the abortion.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
should we have her do the?
Hang on, I'm almost done.
Okay.
Well, let me just ask you the same
We'll come
question
back
back. Would you rather essay a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old?
What the fuck?
What?
I'm sorry. I got... Damn, bro.
But that becomes a question of sexual
Oh, wait,
assault.
no. Answer the question like I did.
But
If you're going to make a false bifurcation for a choice, and I actually
not a false
answer
bifurcation.
it is. What do you mean it's not? If you had to do X or you had to do this, which one would you do? I just gave you the same question back. Now you answer. Which one would you rather
That's
essay?
not the same question.
I didn't say it's the same
You're doing-
question. It's
In
the
my
same
question,
logic.
you're doing two different things. One is an abortion. One
You're
is
doing
something
two
of a
different
person.
things here too. And what we're looking
No,
for is
you're
which one you think is more
You're
morally abhorrent.
essaying either.
When I told you these are morally equivalent to me, you said that's not good enough. You have to choose one. Okay, so I chose one. You're saying these things are morally equivalent to me. Okay, choose one. Which
Okay.
one?
I mean, fair. I don't think that. See, I don't think that they're morally equivalent. When I ask that question, if
I
if
know.
I can pull the same answer and say they're morally equivalent, yes, I think that essay is wrong regardless of age.
Right. Okay, so murder is wrong regardless of age.
I don't think that abortion is murder.
Yeah, I know you don't. But
Okay.
what I'm saying is that if you offer a false dichotomy or a bifurcation for a hypothetical, just remember that I can ask one back the exact same way to test your logic.
But I don't think it's false. I don't think that it is, because I think that there is a difference. So maybe it was wrong to try to test you that way because you
So
genuinely
at 9 months, I just want to be clear.
Mhm.
If a 9-month pregnant woman who's slated to give delivery the next day gets gunned down outside and robbed, that the guy's only going to get charged with the murder of the mom.
I think that I don't really think that the murder of a pregnant person should be considered a double homicide. We do consider it that. I think so, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that. I mean, like I said, you have to draw the line somewhere, and for me, that would be
Has to
birth.
come out.
Yeah, I mean, do you believe in like no exceptions, no abortion?
I would be willing. So this is maybe where I deviate. I would say if there's a threat to the mother's life, which is a non-objectionable threat, meaning we can prove that this is going to cause serious problems to the mom, that in that case, it could be a legitimate medical procedure. I think that that's a rational position. I can understand.
That's like, I think a lot of even Christians could agree to that type of exception. And the problem is even if you grant that, the pro-abortion people still want the abortion all the way to 9 months, so it doesn't really matter. Even if you're like, all right, like they always go to this. Well, what about the death of the mother? What about the what about rape and incest, blah blah blah? And you can say, all right, if I grant all those, life of the mother, rape and incest, if I say those are allowed, but every other abortion isn't, would you be with me? Would you agree with that? Should that be in law? 99% of the time they say no, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Push back to the position, but I think it's rational. It seems irrational to me that you can make the determination that a baby is fully formed, conscious, and everything else at 9 months, but that the day before it's born can be aborted and it's not murder. That's irrational, because at this point you are the only reason you would say it would be murder the next day is because you have formed that as a person. But what is the distinction? It still has to be a person the day before. How could you get around that logic?
But I think you could still find distinctions to be made even in the case of like medical exceptions. So like what is a medical emergency? Like when does it become emergent? Can you give her?
Yeah, that's why you would need to be hyper specific about which cases could be considered that and which ones could not.
But I mean, there's always going to be, I think you're going to have to make an arbitrary distinction because
arbitrary.
Joe donated $200. If I end a pregnant woman, I can be charged for 2 murders. But an abortion is not a murder. Schrodinger's feminist.
Schrodinger's feminist.
But I don't think that it should be a double homicide. So maybe some do. But
Did we get to address the previous two tests that came in? So basically, your baby is due in less than a month, and you want to keep it. This is from SPK. Thank you, and also thank you, Noah. Someone physically assaults you, and the baby dies, but you are barely hurt. What should the criminal be charged with?
Assault of a pregnant woman.
But I do think you did answer the question, because you said that you wouldn't consider it a double homicide.
I wouldn't consider it a double homicide, but I think that our legal system
does. But it's still an illogical position, because you are assigning it personhood just the day after. And so you would have to, I don't understand what makes it not a person the day before.
I mean, what makes a person not able to consent to sex before the age of 18?
Okay, so when you're talking about that, fine. I would even concede you could make a case that that's arbitrary or without system. But in this case, you're agreeing that this is a life the day after. I'm asking for the distinction that doesn't make it a life the day before.
I mean, I do think it's somewhat arbitrary. I think that you have.
So there's nothing?
I think that you have to draw the line somewhere. I mean, no, I don't think there really is anything. But
there's
also,
nothing. So the only thing that makes it not a life the day before,
I don't believe in abortion up until the moment of birth. First of all, that doesn't happen.
But you just said you did.
Did I say that?
You
I
did. You said it has to come out before.
Oh, I think it has to come out to be considered a person. I don't think that. Like I said, first of all, I don't think that women are getting abortions up until the.
I'm not saying that they are. But that doesn't mean that there's not.
But I said
women
that
who don't.
I think he asked, and I said that I think that up until like viability, basically, like if it could be delivered without complication.
Yeah, but there was a counter to that, which was when I asked you, okay, but the law says, let's say you can have it up to 9 months. If they go ahead and follow the law and do have it, is that murder? And you said no. And so at that point, you're giving it justification. So you don't really believe, or whatever your belief is that they should, is just arbitrary as well. They just should because I think they should, right?
No, I mean, there is no like biological consensus on when personhood begins, or philosophical consensus on when.
No, there is a biological. Well, personhood. When you say personhood, that doesn't mean anything. That's just nonsense.
No, it's a legal concept.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't give rights to non-persons.
But the reason it's nonsense is because you can never tell me what a person is.
There's no consensus. I mean, it's
consensus is not a thing we need to appeal to make a determination about what is true and what is not.
How do we
consensus? In fact, appealing to consensus would be an argument ad populum. It would be fallacious in and of itself. You can tell me what a person is without appealing to a majority. What is it? Like
I said, I think there are a number of aspects to it. I don't know, but in law,
so you don't know.
I don't know.
Hang on, you don't know what a person is. You don't know when a person's formed. You don't know when a person should be born, but you're okay with people taking out fetuses at the 9 month. Is that the case? I don't know when they're a person. I don't know when we should stop abortions, and I don't consider abortion at 9 months the day before to be murder.
You didn't say the day before, but the day before, no, I do think that would be distasteful to me. Just my
would it be
intuition.
Murder?
No, I don't.
Okay, well then you're not assigning personhood, but you don't know when a person is a person. So
at birth.
I don't understand.
I know when. I know when.
When?
At birth.
At birth, that's what makes them a person.
So all to her, personhood is outside the birth canal. Like, does that make any logical sense? No.
Birth and not the day before.
The act of birth.
Yeah. What about that act suddenly gives them the same quality that they did not have the day before?
Being born into the world to exist as a person. No longer.
You're still in the world. What do you mean? You're still in the world.
Once they cut the cord, you're not physically.
So the umbilical cord is the distinction between a person.
No, that was more of a.
So what is the distinction? What makes him a person? Nothing.
I've already said it was arbitrary.
So what makes him a person is you made it the fuck up. That's what makes him a person.
I mean, yeah, honestly, a lot of things in law, you do have to make up some sort of distinction.
Just want to make sure we're clear.
Before we move on to a different topic, last thing on the pro-choice versus pro-life argument. Andrew, you might recall the state where they passed this law, but there's a state where they passed a law where men could be on the hook for child support before the child was even born. Maybe it was Kentucky.
I think it was.
Would you agree with that? That before the child is even born, that men ought to be on the hook for child support?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Why not?
I think, I mean, if a man has decided not to be a part of the child's life, I mean, in that case, I guess you could say, well, then why should he be responsible for child support after birth? But I haven't really thought about it. I haven't thought about this at all. I didn't know this.
What about in states where there's abortion bans? Do you think it'd be more justified in that scenario?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. I actually, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Moving on. I did have a question. So we talked a little bit about the patriarchy, and you say that there is a patriarchy.
Mhm.
You know, I've often heard terms used by feminists like smash the patriarchy. Not only are there criticisms, it seems, of the patriarchy by feminists, but you also, if it does exist, and that seems to be what's asserted by feminists, that you wish to get rid of it.
Mhm.
I guess my question is to both of you, well, perhaps more specifically to you, if there is a patriarchy, what ought to replace it?
I think that's a good question. I don't know if it's possible to, because of basically what you described, and I do agree that men are able to exert force over women. I don't know if it's really ever possible to eliminate the patriarchy. I think that if it were eliminated, egalitarianism would be my preferred system, where there is no one sex that is exerting an undue amount of force on the other, and sort of a
matriarchy? Should there be a matriarchy?
I don't think. I mean, maybe that would be justice, but I don't think that would be my ideal system. No, I think it just.
Why would that be justice?
Well, if we're using the definition of righting a wrong, like the justice system.
Do you mean like revenge?
Yeah,
basically.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that would be my ideal system.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Well, so I would answer the question by saying that whether you like it or not, there is always going to be, if we consider patriarchy to be the dominance of men, that's an inescapable fact. It can be hidden for a while. It can be pretended that it's not true, and people can act as though it's not true, and people can act as though they have a higher set of values that they're moving towards. But ultimately, it will always reduce to force, and the pendulum and clock will always go back the other direction, and men will take rights away from other men and women. And this will always be the cycle. And it has to actually be that way, because what ends up happening is through the form of egalitarianism comes its own special breed of oppression. And that oppression in the ever search and the ever expanse for egalitarianism is what we see now, which is antinatalism and oppression towards male groups, oppression towards specific male groups over other male groups, all in the name of trying to make things equal. And so eventually it all just gets reset with force. This is what we see time and time again as society gets more and more decadent.
Yeah, I don't think that means that feminism shouldn't exist, though. I think just because something is, as you say, inevitable, I think that you should still be able to push back against things and maybe hold them off, I guess is the wrong way to say it. But if it's producing undesirable outcomes for women, then regardless of whether or not it's
undesirable outcomes, do you think that the desirable outcomes are the fact that we went from having a 4% divorce to having a 55% divorce? We went from almost no women having mental illness to 1 in 4 women having mental illness. Do you think the fact that the female hormone regulation from birth control, which leads to this mental illness, has been good? I mean, I can go on
actually,
and
I
on
do,
and on.
And I can explain why I think a lot of those things are good.
Okay, I can't wait to hear it.
Higher divorce rate. I think there's probably a lot of women in the past when there was a 4% divorce rate that wish they could have gotten divorced, but they felt either through social pressure or they just legally couldn't get divorced. We're not able to. And I think that if more women are getting divorced, it's
really bad for children, and we know it's really bad for children because we see what happens when you come from a single mother home,
but
absent a father in the home, and what happens with your criminality, what happens with the end results of children who come out of these environments is really, really bad. And not only that, but here's one of the reasons it's so bad. It's because if women replace the biological father with a stepfather, the chances for abuse exponentially skyrocket, much, much, much higher.
No, I agree with
Marriage
that.
is about children, not about you. And this is where I have to defer to the evil of feminist ideology. There is nothing that could possibly be considered more virtuous than staving off your own happiness for that of your children.
Do you think happy children are reared in an unhappy marriage, though? Do you really think that that's healthy for children?
I would assume that back when we had the 4%, everybody was just fucking miserable.
Kind of.
Oh, yeah, and you could support this with what?
All right, so this ends up being, divorce, children, and all that stuff. I want to return more to her abortion argument, just because, like, the failed logic that she has for it. It's just.
Do we want to move it on to anything else?
Again, if you want to go and rewatch it, I skipped from 124:20 on the show. Because this is just more of the sexism, divorce, and racism towards white people, stuff like that. It's kind of a dead sport. Some of the more, or dead donkey, horse, whatever you want to call it. So if you want to go and watch this part, it's 124:20. I'm skipping down to 150:40. Turn to abortion. So we're going to listen to that some more, just because her logic doesn't make any sense, and it just blows my fucking mind.
I'll come back in just a second.
Okay.
Keep going, though.
Okay.
Yeah,
So anyway, back to abortion.
Yeah.
Right. I would still like to know this.
Yeah, go for it.
Now we're getting into more relativism. Can you say intuitively then?
Yeah.
The day before you're supposed to give birth, that not intuitively murder?
don't think that I would say my definition of what is murder is intuitive. I think it's based on the category.
Murder's not intuitive?
I would say
Then why would we have a law against it?
well, I was going to
right?
say no, not intuitive as in like, oh, you don't intuitively believe it's wrong. But my position on this is not just pure intuition. I think we've already established that my definition of personhood is not fully fleshed out. I don't have a fully fleshed out legal definition of personhood, but it's based on my.
She doesn't have a logical definition of personhood. What are you talking about? Oh, I don't have a legal definition of personhood. You don't have a logical definition of personhood. Your definition of personhood is was it 9 inches or some shit like that? 6 inches? I can't remember. From like that doesn't make any sense. 6 inches is your definition of personhood.
Reasoning that before you are born, when you're still in your mother's womb, there's problems there with considering that a separate person, because I mean they're not a separate person. They don't have the ability to survive outside the womb. So then, okay.
I mean, without any assistance from anyone, fucking a 3-year-old can't survive outside the womb. What are you talking about? Like, even a 3-year-old can't survive out the room without the womb, without the assistance of others.
Viability might be the point.
So if I feed you while you're unconscious, are we separate people?
No, but I mean,
well,
I would argue that a person who is in a coma or a person who's on life support is in a state of altered personhood. I don't think they're not a person.
What the hell does? Well, okay, they're not a person. What's the delineation then? What makes them not a person?
I mean, I really don't.
Wouldn't you give them the same moral consideration you would anybody else?
We don't take the life of individuals, but we can take someone in a coma off life support. We can take.
That's not taking. There's a distinction here to be made. Okay.
I mean, yeah, that's not taking their life. It's taking away supportive.
Mm-hmm.
But we can do things to people in certain states that. I mean, the death penalty. You can argue that they did something to deserve it, but we have reasoned somehow that murder is justifiable in the case of.
Well, what a murder is an unjustified killing to begin with, right?
That's a definition that you've chosen. That's
a definition you would back up, wouldn't it? What else could a murder be other than an unjustified killing? Couldn't be a justified one.
I guess. I mean, would you consider like killing in self-defense to be murder?
No, that would be a justified killing, right?
Okay, so it's just killing. So that means
it's killing in a way which is justified or unjustified.
Okay, so
murder would be an unjustified killing, and killing could be justified, so therefore not murder.
Yeah, so I mean, taking a life can be justified.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, so I mean,
so that's why I'm looking for your justification for what makes this not murder. Because from my perspective, if I went into a coma patient who was not off of life support and started stabbing him in the chest, you would consider that to be murder, right?
Yeah.
So what's the distinction here?
Because I do not believe that fetuses have personhood. I do not believe that they have the entitlements.
A human machine.
I don't think that's necessarily why. I just think that how can we classify a fetus as a person? It has not been born yet. That to me is the point in which a person enters into the world. Prior to that, they're gestating.
When you say born, right, you just mean outside of the womb, right?
Well, there's a reason that, I mean, we have a word for it, fetus, and you can call it a baby if you'd like, but the accepted term is fetus, and when it's born, it's a baby. There's obviously a difference
and he's an adult, and that could be a child, and that could be a cousin, and that could be, you know what I mean? But they're all still identifying human beings. Is he an adult, make him less of a human than you being, let's say, a child, or him being my cousin, or him being my aunt. They're all still human beings, right?
Yeah.
So just saying it's a fetus does not negate humanity.
No, but I mean, human is different from our legal category of personhood. Human is different.
I think that it's a requirement for personhood.
It is a requirement, but it's not the whole of the definition.
So what is it? What is it? But you don't
well,
know.
I would say there's a number of different things that I said I don't know if I have the whole definition.
Yeah. So what would make you not?
I mean, I would be curious to see what, because I know that it's up for debate, and I know that like the legal category was established.
I mean, I want to be as charitable as possible, honestly.
No,
right? But if you're saying it's really hard for me to be charitable, if you say the day before you're slated to give birth, if the mom goes in and aborts, you would prefer that she didn't, but it's not murder. That to me does not seem like a rational position, because the only distinction is, well, the baby's still inside the womb, well, but I'm not sure why it would make it less of a person.
Well, whether or not you agree with my rationality or my rationale is that personhood begins when you're born, and murder is.
Yeah, but why does it begin when you're born? What makes you a person then and not the day before? I don't understand that. I can't figure out a single distinction.
Being born, I guess. I mean, that just is my rationale.
Yeah, but that's just a process. Like, okay, what if it was in a machine? What if the kid was in a machine, like an artificial womb?
Like prior to.
Yeah, the day before. I mean, it's totally viable to take.
And again, her process, her definition of personhood is you need to move. Was it 6 inches? Hold on. Okay, 2.5 inches. So 3 inches is the birth canal. Okay, so her definition of personhood is a matter of 3 inches. Does that not make any sense? Like I don't understand this. It makes no sense to me whatsoever that the definition of personhood for her is 3 inches. Okay, like, how can you have such an argument here where like your definition is, look, they just need to be 3 inches in a different location. Okay, 3 inches of a location, that's personhood. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any logical sense. And I think she's realizing that, but she's still trying to like really like, not give up any ground.
Out of the artificial womb, but the day before you release the chamber, you go, fuck it, and you press the dump button.
See, that would be different to me because
Why?
it's existing outside of its mother's body. It is a
The machine is
see
its mother's body now.
I know, but it's
the same thing.
It's in the real world. That
It's in the real world in its mother's body. What is it in a fake? Is the uterus a magical fairy
no,
world?
obviously I don't mean that. It's existing. I mean, that's all I can say is really it's existing outside of the mother's body. Whether or not
but what would make it less of a human being because it's inside of your mother's body?
I'm not saying it's less of a human being. I'm not talking about humanity. I'm talking about personhood because that really
less
is
of
the
a
debate.
person then.
The fact that it is part of the mother's body.
Yeah, but it's part of the machine.
I mean, that's something to think about. But I mean, like, we consider people on life support to be people. Yes, there are certain things that you can do.
Yeah, but it can survive.
All the uterus is a human made, like a human grown life support. That's all a uterus is. What is this talking about? All a pregnant woman is a human life support system. That's all they are. Like, if you want to get down to like, with this argument, like, so her argument still doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, you know how bad an argument is when they have to make so many leaps in logic to do a thing. Like, her logic is, 3 inches, all right, and a location. 3 inches of a location, all right. So 3 inches out of a birth canal, that's personhood. Does anyone logically think like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense? No one thinks that. No one can think like, personhood, 3 inches. That's all it takes. It takes 3 inches because like it doesn't make any sense. I think she actually sat down and thought about this. She would realize how dumb her stance is. I think she just thought of this. She didn't really actually think it. And I would be willing to bet if they had this argument, a couple weeks later, and they talk about the same thing, I'm willing to bet if she's, gonna be a logical individual to say like, yeah, that was kind of dumb.
The difference is in life support. You can't survive without the life support, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the machine, you could survive outside of the machine. In the case of that womb now, you can't. The baby could survive outside the womb. They're viable in the machine and in the womb, maybe not on life support.
Mm-hmm.
So these situations, the artificial womb and the uterus, seem identical to me. What is the distinction here to be made?
So, okay, you're asking like if a baby is viable, is an abortion murder in that case? I honestly, I haven't really thought about it because of the fact that I think that viability should be a limit for abortion. But I mean, I want to say no because I still think that personhood is when you're born, and I don't think that you can call it murder otherwise. But then, yeah, I mean, there's a contradiction there. I can admit that. I just don't. I have a hard time calling that murder. I don't know.
Well, maybe something to think about then. If you have a contradiction in the position.
Yeah.
2 other quick topics, then we'll do, if there are any
position.
super chats, there'll be kind of a super chat / Q&A. The Q&As will be through the super chats. So I don't know if we got into it, the wage gap. Was that a conversation?
No, I don't think so.
So typically there's this, familiar with the wage gap?
Yeah.
Do you think it's something that exists? Are women paid less than men for the same work?
I think in the past they definitely have been. I think there
It's shrinking is what you're saying?
It's shrinking. I think you could probably make the argument that women in certain positions are probably paid less because there are I don't know if I totally believe that a wage gap, like a meaningful wage gap, exists like in the United States today, though. I think that there are probably positions where women are unfairly being paid less, but I mean, is it like a widespread phenomenon? I'm not sure, but globally, yeah, I guarantee. I'm sure there are countries where women are getting paid like cents to the dollar, but
not in the West or not in the United States.
I can't really speak for any other country, but I don't think. No, I don't really think so.
And I mean,
I'm not
when
saying,
do you think that, because you would, I think you would say that at least historically in the US, perhaps as recently as 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that,
for example, Barack Obama, and I think one of his speeches or perhaps a State of the Union address, he did say that there's still, he said that there's a wage gap. I don't remember the exact numbers he gave. I often hear 77 cents on the dollar, 83 cents on the dollar. And that was as recently as the 2010s. He was, President of the United States was saying this. So
yeah, I think that.
When do you think it disappeared, if it did?
I don't know if it's fully disappeared. I think that legislation has been introduced over the years multiple times prior to the 1900s, I really have limited knowledge, but
Then can you tell me where the wage gap is? There is an earnings gap, but there's not a wage gap. Everyone gets paid the same. They just don't earn the same because of various things. Now, by paid the same, I mean if you get into this, if you're man, woman, you get into the same field, same qualifications, you're going to get the same wage. Okay.
the Civil Rights Act in part addressed unequal pay. So there is legislation that mandates equal pay for equal work for men and women. Whether or not that always happens in practice, I don't know. I can definitely see that there could be situations in which it's probably not put into practice.
What about, for example, in sports, for example, I have heard complaints from feminists who will say, for example, that women in the WNBA or female soccer players, in fact, there's actually a lawsuit by I believe it was the women's national team filed a lawsuit that they were alleging that they were being paid less than their male counterparts. Do you think that, for example, and it certainly is the case that female basketball players are paid less than male professional basketball players? Do you object to that? Do you think that
as they should?
There's
no, I mean, I think that it is based on viewership, and whether or not I object to the whole, it sucks that women's sports, no one cares about them. Yeah, that's sad to me. I don't really care about either gender sports. But yeah, I think pay is going to be based on.
Not only does no one care about them, women especially don't give a shit about them. Every time, like you like I see these conversations about the wage gap and women not getting paid in sports, there's always a question asked like, well, what can you name a WNBA player? And they never can. So I mean, if you really care so much about women in sports, why don't you go watch them? why do men have to go watch them? You guys, it's always funny to me.
It's on how much money you're making for the for whoever they're making money for. I don't know. With soccer, I'm not really sure because I feel like women's soccer is pretty popular, but I don't know.
Yeah, but men's soccer is far more popular.
I don't think they should necessarily be paid the same, though.
And then just the last thing here, at least for my topics, I don't recall if it came up in our conversation. Perhaps it did, but it seems to me like you said you're a feminist. You believe in equality. What are your thoughts on military conscription and the current state of things in the United States, where only men have to register for the selective service and only men are subject to forced military conscription? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that could definitely be an example of a way in which the patriarchy negatively affects men, because men have been tasked with enforcement, with protecting law and order in our interests, and
they're the only ones who can, right?
Yeah. So I mean,
so then why shouldn't they give themselves additional privileges, knowing that you cannot defend their rights while they sleep, but they must defend yours?
Well, there are women in the military. I mean, there might not be as many, but there are women in the military.
But if they decided tomorrow not to allow women in the military either, this is something which they could do. Why not just give themselves additional privileges based on the fact that you cannot protect them while they sleep? They have to protect you, and we're not ever going to go to an all-female military. That would be absurd, and we would lose. So
okay, why don't women give themselves extra privileges for doing the majority of the housework and child rearing? Okay, so if you're asking why should they or shouldn't they, your answer is because they can?
Well, in this particular case, I'm saying to you, men, since they can do this, right? And you agree that they can do this, what would be the imperative for why they don't do this?
Because I think it would be unfair. I think it'd be unjust, because I think there are also ways in which women put in an additional amount of work. I mean, whether or not you want to argue that they're equivalent, women do the majority of the housework and child rearing, even working women.
If it's justice, and justice is about what's fair, then I think it's unfair that women don't have to sign up for selective service. And I think that it's unfair that they're always, for the most part, going to be held to a lower standard in enforcement roles than men. That's unfair. And since that's unfair that they're allowed to go in and get the same pay as a private in the Army, as a male private in the Army, or a male lieutenant in the Army, I think it's fair that they get the right to vote. It's fair that women don't.
Okay, but I mean, that doesn't change that. There are things that women are doing that men can't do.
What?
Give birth.
Okay,
go.
I was just going to say, though, the difference is that one is enforced by the government. Like there's nothing.
Okay, yeah. If we keep it to selective service, yeah.
Right. A woman, if she was so inclined, could go her whole life without. She could not have sex.
Forced. Nothing's pressed in.
Yeah. Well, then I mean, if it's between that and men taking away all our rights, yeah, sign me up for the draft.
It's not men taking away all your rights.
Okay. Well, I'm saying
What do you think that women didn't have any rights before they couldn't vote?
No, but I mean, they certainly didn't have as much of a say in it politically. But anyways,
they did have as much of a say politically. They just were able to do it from a moral high ground rather than as a voting bloc.
I don't want to get too off topic.
Okay.
I do have thoughts about that. No, I do think it's an example of a way that men are held to a different standard. Yeah, I mean, if you want to say it's because of biology,
and so would it not be just then for men to give themselves additional rights, like the right to vote?
No.
Why would that not be correcting an injustice?
Because there are ways in which women are, like I've already said, are putting in an additional amount of work. Is the difference for you?
What way? What way are women putting in an additional amount of work?
Child rearing, domestic labor.
Okay, so when it comes to child rearing, first of all, men are 50% responsible for the children.
50% responsible, but they're not actually in numbers. If you look at the statistics, they are not putting in the same amount of hours.
They put in all their hours at work taking care of their families. Even
in families where the mother is working as well, the mother is still doing the majority of the housework and the majority of child.
That's because he's still doing the majority of the physical work. So in most two-parent households, the man still works longer hours and makes a higher wage than the woman does.
Even in those households where they're doing comparable hours outside the home, the woman is still doing more hours inside the home.
Yeah, I know, but that would just equal out. If the man works 10 hours and she works 6 and takes care of the household, then it's equaled out. You would still have this additional privilege problem of men having to get drafted and protect you while you sleep because they're the only ones who can enforce rights. And
Okay,
you say, but it's
how many
still
men are
women are
actually
putting
fighting in the
in.
military right now?
women
Why would men as a
Well,
whole?
they don't fight in the military. They're not in combat roles for the
Okay,
most part.
so why would men as a whole deserve special privileges for having to sign up for selective service when only some men are going to ever see combat?
Well, then, could we just give those men
We do give them
hang on. Can we just give them the right to vote then? Since they're the ones who ultimately are, I would be fine with that.
Another thing is the reason why they should get, additional rights is because if they don't sign up selective service, they are punished for it. And if they don't sign up for selective service, they get they can't vote. So that's why. If women don't sign up for selective service, if they don't go to the military, they still get to vote. If men don't sign up for selective services, they can't vote.
That just those who signed up, men or women. We just give men or women who actually did some kind of service for the United States and the country the right to vote. That seems like an additional privilege that they deserve and what is just.
Because who's to say that fighting in the military is the most important thing of all?
Why would they need to only fight in the military? You could think of other types of services which they could provide for the United States in a, as a.
Well, yeah,
as a
but we're saying that they should be the only people who can vote because they have signed up and seen combat. And
no, well, because men can't vote if they don't sign up for the draft. They're not allowed. They're disqualified from the vote.
Okay, well,
so men are disqualified from the vote. They don't sign up for the draft. Women not disqualified from the vote. They don't sign up for the draft. So if we wanted it to be fair, why don't we give military personnel the right to vote? We'll do it men and women.
They do have the right. You mean only military personnel the right to vote?
Yeah.
Because
then if you're drafted, think about it. Because then if you're drafted as a man, you go into the military. Hey, now you have the right to vote. You have nothing to complain about, right? You were compulsed in, but now you have this additional right nobody else has. You can't get drafted, but you can sign up. And then you can get the right to vote too. Service guarantees citizenship.
Well, I just don't think that's the way we should run things.
Yeah, why not?
Because I think there are other important
I
aspects.
don't know. It
of
doesn't
society.
sound very justice-y to me. It sounds like you want a privilege that men don't have.
No, well, I already asked why should men as a whole get special privileges?
I just told you, I'd grant that they shouldn't. Only the ones that go and serve and the ones who get drafted in should be able to vote. And the same thing with women.
You think that's the way the country should be ran?
Yeah, well, what's wrong with that? Doesn't it seem like it corrects a great injustice, which is allowing all women to vote?
No, I think there are other injustices in the world. I mean, why say that? Why is that the greatest injustice?
I didn't say it's the greatest. I just said it's an injustice.
Well, then why organize our whole society around some random injustice?
You don't organize your entire society around only the greatest injustices.
Okay, why organize it around a minor?
You're not even organizing it around that. It's just one deviate from the process that we have now.
I would say who can vote and who can't is central to a federal republic.
Yeah, but everything is. Having a Congress is. Having 200 or 400 people in Congress is. Having 3 people in the Supreme Court versus 10 is. Every part of the process is important. Not one part of the process is any more important than the other usually. So
okay, it seems completely arbitrary to say.
It's not arbitrary because you would be correcting for what you consider an injustice. So you have a process. Arbitrary means without process, right? You do have a process for justice. Your process for justice is that injustices need to be corrected. And you believe in justice, right?
I mean, sure. I don't.
So then it's not arbitrary.
It's an arbitrary way to correct the injustice.
Wait, okay, then correct the injustice. What would be the way other than to make women draft?
Women also have to sign up for selective service in order to vote.
But when women sign up for selective service, they cannot produce the same type of soldier that men can. So men are still disadvantaged. It's still not just because they're still not going to be able to perform under the conditions which are necessary, which men can.
I really don't think that. I mean, so if the only way to correct that specific injustice is to only allow people who have served in the military to vote, then, I mean, how do we correct historical, racial injustices? What do you propose?
They can still join the military and vote. What do you mean?
But those have nothing to do with each other.
Well, then if they have nothing to do with each other, why did you bring it up like they were correlated? You're looking for the correlate.
Well, I'm saying
who's barring anybody from different race?
If we're going around correcting these injustices in society, why stop at the fact that only men have to register for selective service?
Yeah, I wouldn't. But my point is not whether or not you could then go and correct whatever else you perceive as an injustice. You still could. I'm just saying this is an injustice that we agree is not just. This is something we can actually agree is not just.
Yeah.
So then how can we correct for it? If you say women should also sign up for selective service, that really doesn't correct for it because they still cannot go into these combat theaters and perform like men.
They might not
so
be able to
men
go
will
into
always
combat.
be unjustly in a non-equal way put in these situations because they're the only ones who can be.
I just like how Andrew's just kind of dismantling her logic, and she can't really keep up, and it's really funny. It's really funny. She can't really keep up with his logic here.
But I mean, women can still. Are you saying the fact that men are the only ones who can see combat is unjust?
Because they're the only one. No, that's not the part that's unjust.
Okay.
The part that's unjust is if you're saying that it should be equal, that the draft should be equal, it still would not actually make it equal in service because what would end up happening
equally
is that men would end up having to still take the primary role as combatants inside of the military, thus risking their life and limb far more than women, even if they were drafted. So even if we did the draft, it would still not be just for them to be equals.
I just.
And also, those standards for women in the military are lower. So they still wouldn't be equal.
I just don't agree. I think that righting the injustice would be just having women sign up for selective service. Because,
Okay.
I mean, and then
so,
you could, and then just okay.
even though clearly they're not going to be able to perform the same way men are, and so you're going to have to lean on men for heavy
don't lean
combat
on men.
operations.
Let women figure it out. I guess. Let women defend
Great.
the country.
I
We'll
can't
see how
wait.
it
Yeah,
works.
we'll send women to the front lines of combat. You think that's a great idea?
If we let women defend the country, we don't have a country anymore.
I mean, now
Soften them up.
with drones and things. I mean, I don't think it really matter.
You don't.
No.
Because we fight wars in the middle of the winter with drones and things.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of like hand-to-hand combat going on in the
Most combat is still infantry based. If you look at what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine, yes, drones are deployed in combat. Yes, artillery is used. Still men on the ground with machine guns.
Oh, if you finish your point, I do have to move things on.
Yeah,
But
no
okay.
problem.
Just lastly on that, so are you in favor of equalization when it comes to military conscription?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna get into the super chat and Q&A section. So if you guys want, get in.
All right, that's it. That's the end of it. So like I really wanted to highlight this one because her logic was just fucking baffling. Like she couldn't define personhood. Really, her only definition of personhood was 3 inches from the birth canal, and that's all her definition of personhood was. That doesn't make any logical sense at all. So 3 inches, so that's what defines a person. Like, come on. And you know, it just didn't. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like I don't think a lot of her thinking was fleshed out. I don't think she's really had her views challenged. I think she's spent more time in an echo chamber where people were like, "Oh yeah, I totally agree with what you said there." So I think that's why there's a lot of flaw in her logic, and Andrew did a great job at just dismantling all her views. And again, if she's a rational person, and she comes back and they do a show and a couple of weeks later and she actually sat down and thought about it, I think she probably changed her views and realized that a lot of what she said was just fucking dumb. Like, person's 3 inches. That makes a person. 3 inches is a person. And her only reason for that is, well, you got to define it somewhere. Then why don't we define it when life begins? Okay. Why isn't when life begins personhood? Like, is a miscarriage not a tragedy? No. And it just blows my mind. So, and again, the other chick that he ends up debating, she just ends up being bratty like halfway through. And it's whatever. But yeah, no, this was a really good debate. I really enjoyed watching it. Hope you guys enjoyed watching it. But yeah, it's just blows my mind how an illogical thought can be. Like, her reasoning just didn't make any fucking sense to me. It's not personhood because they're not 3 inches out. Or yeah, it's not. They haven't descended 3 inches. It's not personhood. Like, it just, how ridiculous is that? All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like, subscribe, give me a like and a follow. Make sure you check me out on X and Rumble. I probably will be starting to watch update on the Donald Trump stuff. And that'll take a majority of my show. I may decide to do like an afternoon stream or something to cover various other topics. But we'll see. I hope you all have a good day. Peace out, and I'll see you later.